So welcome everyone to the Provo Municipal Council work session on September 21st, and it is now 1:04. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Following statement. Meetings of the Municipal Council are now being held in hybrid fashion. Members of the public can continue to view council meetings on YouTube and Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chamber at the Provo City Center. Elected officials, staff, and any presenters are participating in the council chamber or by using Zoom webinar. The coronavirus pandemic is not yet over, but vaccines are available. We encourage everyone who is eligible to get vaccinated. We encourage all people to protect themselves and others by following the protocols set forth by the CDC and our state and local health departments. Stay safe and be kind. This meeting is being broadcast live on the web on Provo City Council YouTube, on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. We'll go ahead and do a roll call at this time. It looks like we have all the council except Mr. Fillmore at this time is excused, and also Chair Sewell is excused as well. We'll excuse the mayor. She's not here today, Mayor Kafusi, but note that Isaac Paxman and Wayne Parker are both here from the administration. Appreciate them being here, as well as other staff with the council. We'll go ahead and start by having an opening prayer given by Councilor Travis Hoban.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful to gather together to serve this great city and the people of the city. We ask that our time together will be blessed with good discourse, and that we will be able to make the right decisions. And we're cognizant of this responsibility, and we hope that we can represent the hearts and minds of the people of Provo and do the best thing for them. And we ask for a blessing on all those who are struggling with the pandemic in different ways, and that they can get back on their feet fiscally or physically or emotionally. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Travis. Thank you for that prayer. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. If you are participating via Zoom, please use the raise hand to indicate that you would like to speak. Please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. If you are sitting in at the dais at the council chamber, you will need to raise your actual hand instead of clicking an option in Zoom. Muting and unmuting your microphone will need to be done with the red buttons at the dais instead of on your computer. I think George and David I think we're clear on that, so we can move on. All right, first thing we've got today is approval of minutes. It is proposed that we've approved the following minutes from September 7th, 2021 work meeting. Are there any objections or requested changes on these minutes? These are the ones that have already been updated, correct? Okay. Seeing no objections, I declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. So the first item of business today is the fiscal year 2021 carryover report to the council. We've got 15 minutes for this, and it will be presented by Kelsey Zarbach, Provo City Budget Officer. Kelsey.
Good afternoon. I'm Kelsey Zarbach with Finance, here to talk with you about carryovers. Just a quick overview. Budget carryovers are basically when departments request for old year budget to come across into the new year budget. And I'll go through the breakdown of what those types of requests are and what was approved by the mayor. So first, I just wanted to run you through the process briefly of how the carryovers work. In July and August, just keeping in mind that our fiscal year ends in June, July and August is when you have departments looking at their old year budget, kind of figuring out, oh, we had POs that we opened back in May and June that maybe the invoices didn't come due until August or, July, that kind of time frame. So they're making lists of these things that they're going to need budget for in the new year that they had intended to pay for with old year budget. And they're also looking at just vehicle replacement balances. They're looking at their capital expense accounts, all of that. And so these are the types of conversations they're having. They send us lists to finance. We receive those lists in the August, September timeframe, and we compile them by department. So that way we kind of can keep track of who's asking for what. I think a key thing that finance does is we look at the requests and make sure that in the old year, the departments really do have enough budget to cover those requests if we were to approve all of them. So that way we're not making up budget or anything. Then in September, the mayor reviews the carryover list and will sign it after vetting the various requests, which happened the past couple of weeks. Oops. Let's see, I'm struggling with the, am I pointing it the wrong way? Did we get it? Oh, there we go. So basically, this is the breakdown. We kind of color code the different carryover request types. And they're also kind of ranked in a hierarchy. So encumbrances on an old year PO, like those are kind of an automatic given. We're going to carry that money over. Historically, universally agreed upon carryovers, those usually consist of your your capital expense budgets, your vehicle replacement budgets, grant balances that still need to be carried over. And in the past, we haven't really ever had issues carrying those over. The next category we looked at were items that were related to ongoing jobs or commitments. I think a few examples in the general fund of those, we have the Urban Deer program. So that's kind of an ongoing thing that we carry budget over for. And then we also had some other critical equipment needs. These could have fallen perhaps under the other category, but we felt like they were pretty pressing needs. This year they were related to the new City Hall building. There were, I think, 3 requests. For example, IS recognized that they're going to have to move some of the IT infrastructure from this building to the new building, and there are costs associated with that. So they asked for some carryover budget for that need. And I think the council and legal also had some similar needs. And then finally, we had the other category. These were vetted the most, and most of them were removed from the carryover list. And so you can see there's only $5,000 listed there. So if you look at this is just for the general fund, not for the entire city or enterprise funds or anything. But if you're looking just at the general fund, the total carryover amount requested was $2.7 million. I just want to give you a reference point for that number. Last year, the carryover amount that was requested in the general fund was $1.95 million. And we're also keeping in mind that was pandemic year going into a lot of unknowns. The year before that, the carryover request total for the general fund was $4.4 million. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how much this number is in comparison to prior years. So what we did is we figured out the available budget in the general fund was about the 4.3 and subtracted the $2.7 million from that to get the remaining balance of 1.57. That is technically what could fall to general fund balance, but we broke it into 3 categories. If you look at the 2 cells highlighted in blue, the $400,000 as specified in the budget ordinance states that the mayor can add up to $400,000 to the Employee Recognition or Innovation Fund. So that amount was set aside for that purpose. And then new to the budget ordinance this year was the idea that we would, it was up to 20% of what was remaining in the general fund balance minus employee recognition and innovation funding. That would go to the local government disaster recovery fund. So that $234,000 is set aside for that purpose. That leaves the $937,000 left that falls to the general fund balance that isn't committed or assigned to any other purpose. I will just mention that we just focused on general fund right there on that chart. We did do carryovers for non-general fund operating accounts. So that would be, your wastewater fund and airport and library. So there were some carryover requests there. Most of those carryover requests were in the green and yellow categories, our ongoing jobs, projects, programs, and then just our universally historically agreed upon carryover requests. And then we have our CIP funds, so like airport CIP, park CIP, those balances are always carried over just because they're associated with projects that last for several years. So that is basically a summary of our carryovers for this year. I can take questions, however you want to do that.
Thank you for that. Questions from the council? Mr. Harding?
Thank you. I apologize. I'm not organized at the moment. My question is on the yellow related to an ongoing job project program. And I had a good example here, but now I'm not. So some of these, for example, I'll pull one from Community Neighborhood Services, bike rack expansion as an ongoing project, and it's listed as yellow, being related to an ongoing project, job, project, program, or commitment. Are those? Is that money that was kind of allocated at the beginning of the year, and it's just money that's in that kind of on that line in that project that hasn't been spent yet? Or is that like an ongoing project and they had money somewhere else and said, oh, well, let's move it to this ongoing project?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure the first assumption is right. And I think for CNS specifically, they had even mentioned, I think it might have been 2 years ago or even 3 years ago, like even the council had said, these are some priorities for the council that we want. And there might have been an appropriation associated with some of these. And they're just wanting to make sure that that doesn't get lost and that those projects are going to be funded until the funds set aside for them are exhausted. Okay.
That's helpful. And let me just say that all of this color coding is very helpful. I appreciate kind of the review of the overall, magnitude of the carryover funds and whatnot. But as we've talked about before, obviously the blue, just makes sense. The green, I would, encourage. I think what we do with the kind of the green labeled ones are, it's wise use of our money to do that. And I think the yellow is just the yellow and I guess the other three colors, the yellow, red, and purple are really the only ones that I want to take a little bit closer look at. And again, the yellow, as long as money isn't being moved around there, then also I don't have any concerns on that. So, but this is a very helpful document in the way that it's prepared. I really appreciate the effort that has gone into that and for the information that it gives the council. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? For the sake of the public, we're looking at a chart here. Could you help us understand what available budget, what that column even means? Is this excess from revenues, or is this money that was already budgeted within departments that was then just for the sake of the public? I think it'd be helpful to explain that.
Yeah, so it's money that was already budgeted. It was just part of the approved operating budget last year. And then it's just the balance of that. Revenues aren't a factor here.
It's not part of it.
Yeah.
So when we look at remaining balance, this is unused dollars from departments that are coming back to the general fund that were budgeted. Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
That's a great clarification.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the council? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Borgett.
I just wanted to let the council know that when we come back in November with our audited comprehensive annual financial report, we plan on having a detailed discussion on the revenues that exceeded budgets for the year. And then we'll have that discussion as well as thoughts and feelings about the disaster recovery fund related to those revenues. So
perfect.
We'll have that second discussion then.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So our next item of business today is a resolution appropriating $8,772.09 from the general fund sales tax revenues to the Economic Development Division in the general fund for contractual sales tax increment post-performance payment to Days Market. This is slated for 10 minutes and will be presented by Mr. Keith Morey, Development Services Assistant Director. Keith?
Hi, thank you very much. Some of these we are playing catch up on. So we just did a Days Market agreement like this earlier this year. But because that one was late, because we were finally putting that agreement together and had the sales tax detail, we're just catching up and doing this one as well. So if you remember, this is a reimbursement agreement that we entered into with them in 2019, that if they made certain improvements to their store there on the surrounding property, that we would participate in a sales tax reimbursement agreement. And so they have completed those, of course. We've already done one payment, and then we've calculated the sales tax for this last year, and the amount that they are due based on the sales tax that's over the amount of sales tax that they were generating in the past is the $8,772.09. So basically, this is just a work session. In case you have questions about it, we'll bring this to you in 2 weeks. But this is just to follow through with the commitment that we made with them in the agreement in 2019. And actually, I think if you've been to that store, you recognize what a great improvement it was and what a great asset they are. I mean, I constantly get great feedback from people on what a wonderful store that is.
So just to clarify, going forward, this will happen
Yearly.
but a few months after the fiscal year ends, just to keep updated on.
Well, and it won't just be fiscal year, because some of these, just depending on when we approve the agreement and when we capture the window of sales tax, it may be not exactly in line with our fiscal year.
Okay.
They'll kind of fluctuate a little bit depending on when they've actually submitted them to us. Some of them, like the Parkway Village one that we're doing tonight, it's taken us a little bit of time to clarify with them which businesses were in operation when they started the project versus which ones are in there today, and how do we capture the right window so that we're giving them full credit for the sales tax dollars that were generated out there. And it's just a little bit of a process, because sometimes those Days Market is a little cleaner because it's kind of one business. Some of these other ones that we've done with larger complexes that have more than one business are a little bit trickier for us to kind of keep track of.
Okay. So questions or discussion from the council? I don't see anything online, so thank you, Keith.
So much.
Appreciate it. The next item of business is a presentation from the Housing Committee regarding an ordinance change for ADUs to comply with Utah state law. This is slated for 30 minutes, and we've got Mr. John Magnus, Policy Analyst, and Robert Mills, Planning Supervisor, both slated to present.
Good afternoon, Council. So last legislative session, state passed HB 82, which set out new requirements for accessory dwelling units. It applies across the whole state. The rules are not the same for every jurisdiction. We have a carve out because we have a private college. So it reduces the amount of our area that is zoned for residential to be included into the accessory dwelling units. The Housing Committee has been working on this issue for the last 5 months. We've come to some decision points. We're looking for some direction. I sent out an email the other day telling you about the five questions we have for you to think about. Today, we're going to go over those and try to get some direction from you. Some of them will probably explain pretty easily. I won't need any direction, just so you understand what we're up against. So, HB 82.
John, excuse me, if you could speak right in the mic, that'd be great. Thanks.
HB 82 basically says that inside of an existing single-family dwelling, they're allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit in it now. It has to be primary. It has to be owner-occupied. It has to be long-term rental, no short-term rentals. And it must be within the existing footprint of the structure that's on the property. No expansions, unless they're going to expand the whole house themselves. And I can't get to, oh, there we go. Okay, so the two areas I'm going to focus on are code enforcement. HB 82 gives us some teeth in our code enforcement now. We can require them to have a rental dwelling license which we're working on in another committee, we can actually place a lien on the property. So if there is a violation and we do everything that the state says how we have to put the lien on and do it all right, we can actually get $100 a day for the violation. If the property is sold and the lien's not cured, we will capture our money at that time. So we do have some teeth in it now, unlike before where basically you would take forever to get unlicensed accessory dwelling unit to come in compliance, if we could get them into compliance. So we have a little more teeth in code enforcement this time, which is a bonus for us because at least if they go to sell the property, we can have it rectified. Parking, this was brought up in the committee. Currently, HB 82 allows us to require one more additional parking spot for the AUD. So according to our city code 14.37.060 in the R1 zones, we need 3 parking spots minimum. So HB 82 allows us to require 4. But on the backside of our ordinance, we also have that you have to have 1 parking space for every vehicle associated with the house. Talking to the legal department, they feel that we can still require that. So if the ADU accessory dwelling unit comes in and has 2 vehicles associated with it, we could still require them to have enough parking spots for all the vehicles associated with the property, and that 1 extra that we're allowed to ask for wouldn't limit our ability to request more parking spots. So any questions on those 2 pieces? That's the 2 pieces I'm going to carry. Robert Mills is going to cover the rest of it on the other side of it. Yes, Ms. Shanley?
And could you give us the definition of an ADU for the purposes of this bill?
So for purpose of this bill, the ADU has to be inside of an existing single-family residence, owner occupied, has to be within the footprint. The one caveat in that is they could convert a garage. But we could request that if they're going to convert a garage, that they're going to have to replace the parking spots with it. So we have a little more control on that side. But it strips our ability to actually say how it's built. We can't ask for an internal passageway between the accessory dwelling unit and the house. But most houses are built with the basement. There's already a door there. It's not likely the owners are going to seal up that doorway because at some point they might want to use the space themselves. So it does not include accessory dwelling units that are built on the property outside of the footprint of the main residence.
But does it has to have a separate kitchen or a kitchenette?
Yes, it can have, right, basically it's going to be a full functioning apartment. But it's under the code, under the new rules, it's not considered an apartment. It has to be considered an accessory dwelling unit. So we can or cannot require a separate meter. That's up to us. Currently, we don't require a separate meter. We don't allow it. So that would stay in place for us.
Sounds like some of this is at odds with current code. Do we need to do anything?
We are at odds with
Legislatively?
some of our current code. We are working through that with legal, trying to clean this up. But like I said, we do have some decision points that we need some direction from the council before we make those decisions and we carry on. We can have this done pretty quick. The ordinance has been rewritten. We just have some decision points. This really was a decision point until we got the parking. We got the parking resolved yesterday. We got the questions answered from legal. So it's not a much of an issue as it was before.
Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. Mr. Harding.
I apologize. You mentioned earlier about RDLs, and you said it was being addressed in another committee. What committee is that?
The zoning committee was tasked with looking at how we charge for those. During the last budget cycle, we're not doing cost recovery on it. So they're being tasked to look at the cost recovery. And in that, they're also going to look at how we can get better enforcement on it.
Okay, awesome. And then I think you just said that we got answers from legal about parking.
Yes.
And so.
Right, because when we had that discussion yesterday, you were worried that this was going to preempt us from requiring additional spots for a pass 4. And according to legal, no, this will not. We can still, if there are 6 cars associated with the property, we can still require 6 parkings, off-street parking for those 6 vehicles.
Okay, even if more than one of those are from the accessory apartment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Good afternoon, Council. I appreciate being here. So my purpose in being here today is hopefully to add a little bit of context to the discussion. And Provo City actually, as you know, already has quite a bit of extensive ADU accessory apartment information, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and understand some of the requirements that we need to talk about to coming to compliance with the state. So things that we're going to talk about, current context, additional requirements, and then just get direction from the council. So be prepared. So just so everybody understands, currently accessory dwelling units are permitted as an accessory use in the residential conservation or RC zone. And then they are also permitted as in R1 zones that have an A or an S overlay. So if you look up, and I apologize to those that are on Zoom, I'll be pointing at a couple things, but hopefully I'll be able to describe it as well. But on the screen, this is an area of our city. If you can see the underlying map, it's near BYU. And actually, I picked this particular one because all three of these types of zones are represented on this page. So you can see circled there, there's an R18S. So it has that S after the zone. Up to the top of the page is an R16A. And then the RC zone. So accessory apartments are allowed in all of those zones. I also want to put in the caveat that accessory dwelling units per our code are also allowed in agricultural and residential agricultural zones. However, we currently don't have any of those zones that have an A overlay, but it is important to understand that. So that's where they're allowed. And then currently our standards for accessory dwelling units are found in chapter 1430 of the code. John touched on this, but our code already requires that accessory apartments are only allowed in owner-occupied single-family detached dwellings. They have to have at least 4 parking stalls for off-street parking, but as John mentioned, if there are more vehicles associated with the property, then those vehicles have to be provided for off-street parking on the site as well. The ADU cannot alter the appearance of the structure, so it can't look like a duplex, can't have 2 front doors or something like that. It still has to look like a traditional single-family dwelling. There are specific occupancy standards, whether it's in an A overlay or an S overlay. And then we do require already a rental dwelling license. So I have a few tables in here that kind of goes a little bit of breakdown. Please, if you have any questions, just let me know. So in this graph, or excuse me, in this table, you can see that we broke all of our residential areas in Provo out to understand exactly how many acres we're talking about. When I say residential acre areas, I'm talking about zones that are primarily for residential use. R1 zones, LDR, HDR, MDR, most of our pro zones are primarily for residential uses. So that's where we come up with this number of 7,841 acres. That's already in our city zoned for residential use. Those parts of those residential areas that are already zoned to allow accessory dwellings are 1,556. So a little bit over 1,500 acres. And that comes out to about 20% of our city, of the residential zones. HB 82 requires a university city like Provo to actually have, to allow ADUs in 33% of our residential areas. So that's important to keep in mind. So that 13% is something that we're going to need your direction on.
Real quick on that one. your acres didn't include any of the agriculture?
They did not, because HB 82 is primarily interested in residential areas. And so you'll see that in some of my later tables that we didn't include those just for that reason.
Just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Good question. So in summation, as we made our calculations to the best of our ability, it looks like we need to add about a little over 1,000 acres or 13% more area of our city to allow ADUs in. And so this is a council question that I want you to keep in mind as we go to the next couple slides. At what scale would you like to add additional areas where ADUs are allowed? And by scale, I'm talking about, do you want to only, would you like to see accessory dwelling units provided in most R1 zones? So across the city? Would you prefer to only add enough area that would actually make us compliant with HB 82, somewhere in the middle, something like that? So that's just something that I'd like you to keep in mind as we progress. So we as staff yesterday spent the afternoon trying to figure out maybe some solutions to do this. This table goes through and analyzes what would happen or how much additional acreage we would add if we just added R16. R16 is residential 6,000 square foot minimum lot. There are an additional 242 acres of R16 zoned property in our city that's not already zoned for an accessory dwelling unit. So if we just added R16, it would add 242 units and so, or acres, and we get up to 23%. So that's not sufficient. Mr. Strachan.
Each of these columns then is a calculation from the base on the left, right? It's not a cumulative all the way across?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. So in each column where it says R16, R17, R18, R10, that's just if we added that particular zone and added the A overlay, how much percentage we would get to. R17, you can see there are only actually 31 acres of R17 in our city already. It adds like 0.4%, so it's negligible. R18 adds over 1,000 acres, so we're a little bit above. R110, significant portion of our residential zones in the city are zoned R110. So that would add 26, almost 2,700 acres. And then if we just did some, if the council decided, you know what, this is something we want to see in all residential, single family residential areas, that would add about 4,300 acres. And so 74% of our residential areas in the city would allow for an accessory dwelling. So again, what we would like from the council, and hopefully you can have a little discussion about this, what are your thoughts on becoming compliant with HB 82 and the scale to which you want to accomplish that? So I'll stop there for a minute.
So a couple thoughts on this is whatever decision the council comes to, if you choose anything less than all the R1 zones, you've got to decide at some point policy-wise, how are you going to define either which of these areas or that particular area versus that particular zone versus another. The alternate was you showed us a map yesterday where we talked about you could pick areas that were contiguous to existing areas that allow them. So there's all sorts of policy questions that you're going to have if you do anything more than R1 zones as a group. But you also, once you've adopted, allow these, you still have the ability to regulate them within certain constraints. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. We will always have development standards for accessory dwelling units. We're not anticipating that this is going to be a situation where if we allow it in the zone, they come and they get a card that says now that you can do this. There are specific requirements that a property owner would need to go through in order to qualify to have an accessory dwelling unit. The parking, the space, all of that type of situation. So none of that is going away. Primarily what we're talking about here is how would you like to increase the area, and is there a specific strategy that you'd like us to use as we do that? As we talked with staff, like Mr. Strachan said, there might be strategic areas that are already contiguous to these zones that we could expand into. Maybe there's, we talked a lot about the R110 zone, that if you really think about an R110 neighborhood, you have larger lots, the houses are generally farther spaced, so there's more area on the street. If there was a street parking situation, even though we have to require off-street parking, and then generally those homes are a little larger, that they would probably be more adapt to accommodate a home. But those are just some things that we'd like your feedback on as we contemplate how to best recommend things to you. The other thing that I considered today as well, we haven't talked a lot about the ag zones. I'm not sure if we would need legal's input if we wanted to make some agricultural areas have that A overlay, if that would allow us to be compliant with HB 82. We have lots of ag area. There's a lot of space there. It would make our acreage go up substantially. But I don't know if that would be in keeping with the spirit of the law. Another thing that we thought about was maybe this is something that we would like input from neighborhoods to say, we have a state mandated requirement. How would you like to help us accomplish this? Like Grandview, how do you want to accomplish having additional units in your area? Dixon, how do you want to do that? And seeing what areas already have this, allowance, what areas might benefit from it, things like that. So I'll be quiet.
Mr. Hanley.
Thank you. Just a couple of initial thoughts and reactions, sort of along the line that Cliff was pointing to. I'm a little nervous about sort of an arbitrary result that comes of trying to meet the 33%. That seems like a little bit of a formula for trouble and mischief, because of, if our goal is we just have to cap it at 33%. So in order to get to that goal, we're going to have all these kind of random areas that are arbitrarily decided on to allow for ADUs and others that aren't. And we can't really come up with a good rationale for why there's that distinction, other than the fact that we're trying to keep it the total at 33%. I think that's troublesome to me. So that's just a principle. It's not really a solution to the problem, but I'm not so much worried about the exactness of the percentage as I would be about the logic and rationale of the areas that we expand it. And another thought, again, sort of a principle that I want us to keep in mind is that, I certainly like that it's owner occupied. I certainly like that there's some off-street parking requirements so that this has minimal impact on a neighborhood. Those tend to be the two things that worry a lot of neighborhoods the most, is whether or not there's an owner-occupied unit and whether there's going to be parking problems. But I do think the ADUs have, as long as those two things are well contained, they have tremendous benefits to affordability questions. So I'm also a little nervous about saying, well, the bigger homes have the better accommodations, when it may be people in smaller units who actually face more. I know people in large homes face financial stress about the cost of their home too. I'm just saying the advantage of the ADUs is, in my mind, the issue of affordability. It's also a good way to increase some density in the city without having to build lots of infrastructure and new construction. So that's I think in our interest to facilitate some use of expand more use of this in a smart way. So if we can be thinking along those lines too, in terms of how it's going to impact neighborhoods' abilities to age in place or to have diverse populations living in the same area, I think that's another advantage to this that I hope we can keep in mind to guide the decision-making process. Anyway, those are just two quick initial thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? Yeah, Ms. Ellsworth.
Sorry, this isn't a question. I just wanted to kind of encourage dialogue around this specific question that Robert has on the screen. It was important to the Housing Committee to get feedback on a couple of key elements. And the first one that Robert's asking about is the scale. George mentioned that 33% seems arbitrary, so maybe George is interested in something a little bit broader than 33%. But where are the other counselors at on allowing this kind of citywide, or allowing this 50%, or like what scale are counselors comfortable with?
So maybe I'll speak to that just briefly. In looking at this, my initial reaction aligns with what Mr. Hanley was saying at the end about housing affordability, about diverse neighborhoods, about not being able to be arbitrary with this. It's a complicated process, and trying not to be arbitrary about just setting a percentage and then doing it. So for me, I think I at this point, without more information, I guess I default to say that my default answer would be I would expand it generally and more broadly. And be supportive of that. I don't mind getting feedback from neighborhoods. I don't mind, but I think we're kind of going down a rabbit hole if we start to ask different areas whether or not they want this or not, or whether, what their concerns might be. I think that becomes problematic. I would much rather just say, look, this is state law. We have to comply, and it's a complicated thing to draw a line somewhere in the sand. So we may need to more broadly accept. And then maybe look at zoning and enforcement and other issues that are the traditional reasons why people push back on something like this. I think most people want housing affordability. I think most people want the ability for somebody to stay in place, and not get priced out of their home. I think those are good things. I think the complicating factors are issues of compliance historically, and if we can solve those issues, I think we can be more broad. Have more broad-based support for something like this that we need to do probably anyway.
Can I jump in on that really quickly? Please. Actually, I appreciate that idea of compliance. That's something that we hear a lot of feedback on as accessory dwelling units and compliance with zoning. One of the benefits of applying it more broadly is that there is now a pathway to compliance. We fully acknowledge that there are those that have ADUs in their homes that are not in these areas already, and currently the only option that they have is to remove it because the zoning just completely prohibits them from having that type of situation. So allowing a broader approach to this we do feel that would allow people to have a pathway to comply, to make sure that they're built and regulated to the life health safety standards that we have, and a way to regulate them and allow people to come in compliance rather than continuing to be, a violation. So that is one thing to consider.
No, thank you. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you. So we had a housing committee meeting yesterday, and I guess my head has been swimming in this issue since then. I do want to kind of point out, and if I'm mistaken on this, I'm welcome to correction, but maybe I should be ashamed to admit it, but I hadn't read HB 82 until yesterday. And it was mostly after that meeting. And since then, it has really reshaped the way that I'm looking at this issue. For example, we earlier in the presentation, we talked about, well, we need to update some of our ordinances to come into compliance with this law. Previously, ADUs weren't allowed in Provo, except we carved out some areas where they were allowed. And so that's what we have on the books now. This law makes ADUs permitted everywhere. And so the default is that it's allowed everywhere. It does allow us to draw a district where they're not allowed, but it's flipped on its head. It really is flipped on its head. And until we draw that zone where they're disallowed, it's allowed everywhere. And so we need to understand what that default is. I also think it should change our thinking on this as well. The state has made this change. There's nothing to say that if they're unsatisfied with what we do and what other cities do, that they don't make additional changes in the future. But where before we were looking at this and saying, where in Provo does it make sense to have ADUs? And the state has now flipped it. And it's now, where in Provo does it not make sense to have ADUs? In non-college towns of certain size or whatever, only 25% can be zoned out, or that district can only cover 25%. We're given up to 67%, but I still think rather than saying, and particularly rather than saying, well, let's make all R1-8s, add them into it. I really think we should be just looking at and saying, okay, the state default is it's allowed everywhere. Is there anywhere that causes particular problems? And just the fact that it's for college towns, I think, the first thing you should actually be looking at is there any place, that's affected most by the college? And so we should actually be looking at our university and saying, is there anywhere there that it makes sense to disallow it? But that actually is traditionally more the area where we've allowed them. So anyway, I think that's something that we need to understand, both timing wise, as well as when we're deciding, are there areas that are appropriate to exclude that? That should be the question, not are there areas, or where should we grow this in order to meet the state minimum. I really think we should be coming at it from are there any areas where this is problematic, special circumstances where this is problematic, and so I'll leave it at that.
So Dave, since you've been thinking about it, can you help us with some examples of areas that create concern for you, just as a blanket rule? We should not allow ADUs for this reason in this particular, beyond neighborhoods saying we don't,
right,
it's not fit for our neighborhood.
Right. So I would have preferred from the state to give us a little more flexibility in conditions on where it's appropriate, like more property site conditions where it's appropriate. I'm glad that we've heard back from our legal. I think that may be kind of an ambiguous, on parking. That may be, I'm glad they gave us the answer they did. I wonder why internal connections couldn't be worked or theorized and written in such a way that it's like parking, where, hey, this is not, just like parking, the way that we did that. Perhaps, to me, the internal connection is critical. As was someone said, like, well, if that door's already there, someone's not going to close that up because then they can't use it in the future. But if someone's flipping houses, they come in, they're going to invest some money, they're going to turn around and flip it, and they're maximizing. They may not be thinking about like future usability of the owner. They may be trying to get, and if particularly for a smaller house, some of these stairwells, if you can remove the stairs, you open up more space and potentially get a higher return on your investment. But one of the reasons why ADUs are great for housing issues and housing affordability and whatnot is that flexibility where someone can come in as a newly married couple. As one example, there's lots of ways that this, but as one example, they have some kids, and if there is no connection there, they need to move out somewhere else. If, you know, when they outgrow that. Whereas if there's an internal connection, maybe they stop renting for a while because now it's years later and maybe they have more earning capacity. They can grow into that space. And then when they become empty nesters, they can move back out and rent it out again. It's this wonderful, flexible space. If you lose that internal connection, it becomes a de facto duplex, just owner occupied duplex, but you've lost that flexibility. I think that was lost. I think the state didn't think about that. I think that's something that we can probably get written in next year. But in the meantime, anyway, so my concern is more of the conditions and less on broad areas. But if you follow the state thinking that because we're a college town, we can have larger areas exempted. I think you first have to look and say, are there any places around the university where allowing ADUs is going to create such pressure that it negatively impacts the area? I don't think so. As I said before, that's traditionally where we've allowed them.
Where we've carved them out right now.
So I think the other thing that I believe is some historic districts where perhaps adding in these ADUs or allowing the ability to create ADUs could negatively affect that historic aspect. I also don't think that actually applies based on, you know, some of the other things that we were given. But I think the state just said, like, rather than forcing everyone, we're going to give that flexibility. Again, I wish the flexibility was in other areas and not just in this carve out. But I appreciate that the state gave that to us, and I think we should listen. And if there's areas where people can make a good case on why this is a bad fit, I definitely would like to look at that. But offhand, the ones that I can most readily identify, I actually think traditionally we've already allowed them in these areas. And so I actually don't think I'm open to being, you know, I'm open to other suggestions, but generally I don't think there's any area in Provo that we really should exempt.
Okay. So we want to hear from some more counselors on this discussion. But before we do that, Mr. Draper, City Attorney, has some feedback for us.
Yes, I just want to provide a little bit of nuance to what Robert was saying. So when he says that they're allowed everywhere, what he means is all zones that are zoned primarily for residential use. So if it's a zone that is not primarily for residential use, HB 82 is not implicated. So that is just kind of the first nuance I wanted to point out. As a legal matter, as opposed to the policy matters that you're deciding today, or at least discussing today, the way that our zoning code is set up is that all uses are prohibited except for those that are specifically allowed. So as a legal matter, our code allows currently in 20% of the residential areas to have some sort of accessory apartment, accessory space. So as we have prohibited it in the other 80%. And that's, I think, obviously what needs to be fixed to become compliant with HB 82. And how you go about fixing that is certainly what you're discussing today. But as a legal matter, I do want to make clear that even though the HB 82 says it's a permitted use in all residential areas, it then goes and adds the caveat that we could prohibit it in 67%, and the code as written has done that in 80%. So it's exceeded what is allowed, and that's what needs to be fixed.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes. I think Mr. Hoban had to step away, but he had mentioned that his 2 cents at this point is that before we just go forward and making it broadly available everywhere, he'd like to get more feedback on what the potential implications of that might be. Explore more about what the effects of that might be. Ms. Ellsworth, Mr. Fillmore, other feedback? We've got about 5 more minutes for this discussion.
As you're thinking, there is one more thing to just consider as we're talking about ADUs and maybe the possibilities of improving the process. If there are any ways that we could simplify this, currently, they're allowed as an overlay. Should we change that? One thing that we had suggested was maybe as an accessory use rather than having to come through a zone change process every time you want to expand the area or however that might work. We have 2 overlays that in and of itself can be a little bit confusing. And so maybe consideration of eliminating one, allow it as an accessory use, like I said, in the RC zone, or if there are any other suggestions, we would really like to hear those. But I think as staff, as the committee, we're interested in making this as streamlined as possible, making the code as easy to understand as possible. We've actually done some effort in even creating some generic plans of how this would be done, that people could just look at the plans that we have available here at the city and institute that in their own houses. And so anything that you have as far as that would be welcome feedback as well.
Okay. I don't see any online feedback. Mr. Hanley?
Just a quick comment on this. I think that's kind of what I was getting at too, is not only do I don't want a code that looks arbitrary, and I also don't want a code that's too complicated, and sometimes those two go together. And oftentimes when the code is overly complicated, it also leads to more violations, which creates other kinds of problems. So it seems to me that, yeah, the simpler, the more principle-based it is. That's why I'm not worried about the 33% being an important number. I mean, if for whatever reasons we decide that we need to limit it for certain reasons, as Mr. Harding was pointing out, and others, because we see that it's not desirable, then fine. But otherwise, it seems to me that we ought to keep it quite simple.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes, thank you. Be quite frank, I'm unresolved on this. There are a lot of competing factors. It becomes very complicated. I do agree with that. We ought not to be arbitrary in what we do. It needs to be principle-based. My concern is that this kind of a thing has the potential for considerable unintended consequences. We really do need to think this through long term. There was some expression earlier about public feedback, and I personally feel like I need to convene my neighborhood chairs and explain to them what I understand of the law and what our conundrum is, and get their feedback. I don't think we should shy away from that.
Thank you. I understand that time has expired for this, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
Everybody.
All right. Our next presentation is from the Kem C. Gardner Institute. It's entitled Affordable Housing and Housing Affordability. This will be given by Mr. Jim Wood. He's the Ivory Boyer Senior Fellow at the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute. Mr. Wood.
Yes, thank you. Interesting discussion. ADUs, we've done a little work on that. And it does have, certainly has some advantages, but I think Mr. Fillmore is correct. There can be unintended consequences, and it's something that's some communities are very sensitive about. Although we ran some numbers on the issue. We took, as I remember, I think there were 30 cities that have over 20,000 population, and looked at the number of, in most cases, what would be illegal ADUs. They accounted for, as I remember, close to 10% of the rental inventory in those large cities. So the census does report on tenure by units in structure. And so if a basement apartment is being rented, that's an attached unit, and they tally that up and they do it by tenure. That is, it's renter or it's owner occupied. So you can look at the number of renters that are living in attached structures, and those are primarily basements. So there's a lot, and that was part of, I think, behind what the state was trying to clarify and bring some transparency to the issue. Is we've got we have some communities that are low density, but they have a lot of rental units, and many of those aren't compliant. Anyway, it's all part of this issue of housing affordability. And thank you, Elizabeth. I just want to start off with two quick slides here. Underline where we are right now in Utah with housing affordability. I've spent a lot of time, many years, studying the Utah housing market, and we are really at a point this last several months and the last few years. It's been unique, and much of it is driven by our demographic and our economic growth. And this first slide shows our population growth. You've probably all heard these figures. We lead the country from 2010 to 2020 with 18% increase in population. Now, this is a rate of increase. And the next slide shows employment. And we lead the country in employment rate of increase, almost 30%. The only other state that's close is Idaho at 25%. But you can see where the growth in the country is. It's in the West, in Texas, Florida, the Southeast. And but interesting, on this employment growth, this is a growth rate. But if you look at the absolute or numeric change in that 10-year period in Utah, we had 350,000 new jobs. Okay, that's an increase of almost 30%. In numeric terms, that ranks 10th among all states. We rank about 31st in the size of our labor market. So we are outperforming, and we have growth that's disproportionate to our size, which has lots of benefits. We have low rates of unemployment. We have increasing wage rates. We have low rates of poverty, but there's costs that come with it, with this growth. And one of those costs is what it means for the housing market and for the infrastructure. This next slide runs through the factors really driving up housing prices. And I've got to meet with the home builders in another hour, the Salt Lake home builders. And almost every meeting, I'm on the board, and almost every meeting I hear issues on regulatory delays, development costs, and zoning. And you're all aware of that tension between what the developers want to do and what the cities will allow and think is proper for their community. So, but municipal factors are one area where we have some point of entry into what's going on in the housing affordability and affordable housing issues. They can make a difference where you look at these market factors, and we don't have a whole bunch of leverage in labor costs or labor shortage or material costs. Low interest rates are really right now is a response to COVID. And COVID, I think we're going to look back on this period as just like we do the Great Recession and the run up to the Great Recession, that we refer to the pre-recession data and where we were and how housing prices were accelerating. We will do the same, I think, with COVID, because what has happened with interest rates, and which has really juiced up demand and brought a lot of buyers into the market, and we're having a lot of growth, and so even the rental market has been affected. So the housing market, both types, renter and owner occupied, have been. I've I've watched several cycles, housing cycles, and this housing cycle is quite unique in that it affects all types of units, renters as well as owner occupied, and it's statewide, almost. The only areas that are escaping housing shortages and really just record-breaking increases in prices are out in the Uinta Basin, where it's energy related, and then Carbon County does better, but Emery County hasn't done well. So 3 or 4 energy related counties, but the rest of the state is facing housing shortages and housing price increases that are really, as I said, record breaking. For example, just in this last year, you take a rural community like Sevier County, housing prices went up. The median sales price, and it's a pretty good sample. It's not just a few. It's well over 100 sales transactions, went up 40%. Now, that's not sustainable. Maybe that particular market was way underpriced for a while, but it's a situation where we're seeing, again, statewide, both in terms of shortage and housing price increases that just take your breath away. Okay, Elizabeth, next slide. And we do still have a housing shortage, even though we've had record levels of both owner-occupied and renter and condominium development. This chart shows the blue are the number of new dwelling units we get each year, and the red bar is the number of households. And you can see coming out of the Great Recession how we had more households than we had housing units. And that was all right for the first 3 or 4 or 5 years because we had a lot of vacancies due to the recession. And so the excess numbers in households just filled up those vacancies. And we didn't fill the shortage until about 2015, 2016. And but we were short by a few tens of thousands of units. And that doesn't mean those people are homeless. It just means we have no vacancy rate. And that's where we are. We don't have a vacancy rate. I do a vacancy survey for a large firm here. We do Utah County and Salt Lake County. I haven't done Utah County yet, but I just finished Salt Lake County. I surveyed, it's about a third of the market we are interested in. That was 25 units or greater. And I've done this for 20 years, and I survey 20,000 units, 85 different projects, all sizes, ages, and types. And the vacancy rate was pretty much non-existent. It was below 2%. And I think in Utah County, it's not going to be that much different. And the rental rate went up at about a little over 10%. So that is quite an indicator of the housing shortage. We just drive down those vacancy rates. And we do that in the owner occupied as well, where we don't have any. Usually you have a little lubrication in the market where you have some units that are for sale and are vacant. We just don't have that. The new home market doesn't have that, and the existing home market doesn't have units that are for sale and the people have moved. So it's a really tight market. And just go to the next slide, Elizabeth. And again, if you look at the points of entry into the rental market or into the housing market, you've got 3 points of entry. You've got the rental market, the new home market, and the existing home market. Those 3 points of entry continue to show high rates of stress. Now, that previous slide was on statistics and data, and our office does both sets of that. We look at the new home construction, and we also do the demographic projections and estimates for the state. And I hear the demographers talk about the assumptions that go into how many people in a household and so on. So those statistics embody a whole bunch of assumptions. And then on the supply side, we have to rely on what the cities tell us on how many units they permitted that month. These data are on the ground. If you look at what's going on in the market right now, and as I mentioned, the rental market, vacancy rates very low. Now, some submarkets like downtown Salt Lake, not quite yet, but I think in the next 18 months, there's a lot of product. There's 5,200 new apartment units under construction in Salt Lake City. 5,200 units. We got about 42,000 renter units in the city. So we got over 10% of the inventory under construction. New home market, high rates, building and demand. Builders are selling everything they can build, and some of them have had to cut back because they could not keep up with demand. So they stopped taking names. So it's on the builder side, we are at very low levels, and as I said, in unsold new homes and existing home market. You're well aware there and of what's going on. Probably the best indicator of the existing home market, and maybe even of the shortage, is the days on market indicator. I think, Elizabeth, I hope that's the next slide. Oh, no, it isn't. Okay, this is well, we'll go back. I'll get to the days on market in a minute. This next slide is really important, though. And sorry about that heading. This shows quarterly year-over-percent change in housing prices in Utah. And this comes from a federal survey index that's developed, and it has a very good methodology, and it's been around for years and got data back to 1976. If you look at in the 1970s, we had a peak. Utah is prone to price spikes, and you can see the one in the 1970s. And I was doing this sort of work then, and that was a remarkable period. We didn't lead the country, however. In the 1990s, 1994, that 18.3, and then again in 2006, 17.2. We led the country in price increases in both those years. This last second quarter of 2021, prices have gone up 28%. Now, you can see we are, if you take from 1990 to the present, we have, using this index, we have the most rapidly growing housing price index of any state. And, that was pre this 28.3 increase, which is just an outlier, even over these 2 years, 1994 and 2006, when we led the country. Idaho actually was over 30%. So we rank second right now. But, just a bit of a commentary on that. This is really, in my view, has a lot to do with COVID and what COVID provoked, the response it provoked by the federal government and particularly the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, and I don't want to make any judgment on this, they were really, the second quarter of 2020, 95% of all economies in the world saw a reduction in per capita GDP. If you'll remember, oil prices went negative, for heaven's sakes, something that was unthinkable that people would pay if you would take their oil off their hands. We had 3 billion people worldwide who were furloughed. the Federal Reserve stepped in and in a massive way, one of the programs that they adopted was called Quantitative Easing, which they had in the Great Recession. In 12 weeks, the Federal Reserve balance sheet from March of 2020 to June of 2020 went from $4 trillion to $7 trillion, went up $3 trillion. They pumped a lot of money into the system. And again, I'm not making it, we were in a pandemic. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. And the Federal Reserve responded in a massive and absolutely, unprecedented way. And we'll never know if it was too much or not enough, but the consequences are there's a lot of money out there which has driven interest rates down and which has really juiced up the housing market. Okay, that's kind of a sidebar, sorry, but annual percent change in median sales price. This is in Utah County, and you can see that 2021. That's what that's through 6 months. It's probably a little bit higher now. We can see that you'd have to go back to just before the Great Recession to get anything even close to that. It's but we've had this prolonged period of really strong price increases, which is really hurting housing affordability, and it's hurting affordable housing. And I mean, in the state and in Salt Lake City, we are pricing the next generation out of the city. They will not be able to live in the city, even in areas which have been affordable, like Salt Lake City's west side. And, so it's in a community like Provo, where you don't have a lot of developable land left. I'm surprised to hear some of the numbers. In many ways, the price is baked in the cake because, you're at the mercy of the market. And that's the way it is in Salt Lake City. It's pretty much landlocked but in places where you've got available land to develop, you can affect what housing prices will be like for the next generation by regulation, zoning, and so on. Your ordinances for that to be developed land. That's where, and so in high growth communities like, Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, Lehigh, Harriman, Bluffdale, South Jordan, 1 in 6 homes right now are being built in those 6 cities. And there you can really impact the future cost of housing for young families by your ordinances now. When a city is pretty much built out, it's a different issue. Okay, Elizabeth. We're up to almost 500 now. This was in May. It's now 505, I believe, 505,000 in Utah County for the median sales price of a home. And next slide. Here's the one that I said is the really meaningful statistic. Median days on market for a single family home, and it's about the same for condominiums. And you can see where it's now down to 6 days. What that means is from the time the house is listed until it's under contract, it's 6 days, the median. So you'll see, some that don't clear the market for quite a while, but this is a median. And what that 6 says, that 6 days on market, usually realtors will list the property on a Thursday, then they'll have an open house on the weekend. And what we see now is they list on Thursday, open house on with the weekend, and they sign a contract on Monday or Tuesday. We are at a point in time where for the last, particularly in the second quarter and leading into July, I believe, where the sales price as a percent of the listing price was more than 100%. In the late spring, we were up total. This would be statewide. We were up like 5% higher. And everybody has an anecdote of, where a home was sold 20% higher than list price. I mean, it's just an extremely tight market. And then until we see this number creep back up, to something like 25 days or where it's just a very strong indicator of a severe housing shortage. Next slide. This is an affordability, and this is a ratio that's used internationally. And what it is it's the ratio, it's the median sales price of a home. And like I said, in Utah County now at about $500,000, and the median household income. And let's say that median household income was 100,000 and you've got a 500,000. So you've got a ratio of 5. Of course, the median household income in Utah County is a little bit lower than that. It's probably, I think, around 80,000, high 70s. So you get this ratio of 5.6. Now, as you can see in the subheading there, anything over 5 equals severely unaffordable. And that's where the Salt Lake County market is, and the Utah County market, certainly Wasatch and Summit County markets, not yet in Washington County, but we've got, some major counties that housing affordability is, and a recent survey by the Chamber showed that it was, that the respondents put housing affordability right up there with air quality, transportation, and education as an issue. These are worrisome numbers. Probably most of us here are homeowners. We did so well last year, or this last 12 months. Back of the envelope calculation, we got 700,000 homeowners in Utah. And let's say the average price is 400,000, which is probably a conservative number. Okay. If housing prices went up, as you've seen, 25%, that's a windfall, shall we say, of something in the neighborhood of $70 billion for homeowners. So those who are just doing so well. We have the benefits of this growth. It's the next generation. It's our kids, our grandkids, and I have 2 great grandkids living with me. I face the housing shortage every day. We've got 3 generations at home. And one of the issues really is trying to find affordable housing and availability of that housing. So this is an issue that touches, I think, a lot of families. But owners are doing really well. It's the next generation and the generation after that. My great grandkids I worry about. And even my grandkids, I just know how they'll ever afford to live on the Wasatch Front. But next slide. This just shows where puts Utah County in some context here. You can see Pittsburgh's very affordable, St. Louis. The most unaffordable housing market in the world is Hong Kong. And then you can see, but we're on a path really to catch, well, we won't catch, we might close the gap, but Denver and Portland, these rapidly growing western urban areas, Sacramento, housing prices are going up much faster. And I'll show you, I think this is near the last slide coming up. Okay. this is a change in the mortgage payment for the median price home in Utah County. So what I looked at is, okay, in 2015, if you wanted to buy the median price home, what would the mortgage payment, total monthly payment be in 2015 to buy the median price home? And the total monthly payment was $1,663. Now we've had this growth in prices. So what does that mean for my mortgage payment? Well, one of the arguments is, well, we have some consolation because interest rates have come down. And during this period, interest rates went down from 3.95 to 2.95. And that's a big advantage. But that advantage is offset by the individual, the household wants to get in the market in 2021 because the property taxes have gone up. Property taxes, of course, are tied to the price of the home, as is the private mortgage insurance. So the increase in property taxes and private mortgage insurance, which is related to the cost of the home, offset in large measure what's happened with lower interest rates. Now, I've got some sidebars over there on the left. Median household income has gone up 32%, so you could adjust for that. And you've got inflation. So between those, you end up with something like 40%, 47% adjusted instead of 65%. But it's still a big increase. We just can't keep up. You can't run fast enough to keep up with housing prices. Last slide. In summary, as I said, I've been working on this market since the mid-'70s, and the last year really has been unlike any that I have seen, even in this market, which is quite volatile and a market that's been characterized by price spikes. But what we've seen, not only in the owner-occupied market, but in the renter-occupied market, where there's no availability, is unlike anything I've seen in the numbers. So anyway, I wish I had an answer for this. I wish I knew where we were going. I think what we're going to see in the future is a period of price moderation. I don't know how we'll escape that. I think we're going to have that. When you have 28% increase in a year, we're going to have a period of price moderation coming up. Maybe not the next year, but it will. It'll happen out there in the next few years. So thank you. Thanks for the time. I hope I didn't go over. Where are we? Oh, a few minutes over. Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth, and the council. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Appreciate your time and appreciate that information. We are just a few minutes over, but any quick questions from the council for Mr. Wood? Mr. Harding?
Thank you. I am very concerned about the housing crisis, about housing affordability, and as you say, it's unsustainable. I do sometimes struggle a little bit when people start saying, well, it's local regulations, it's state regulations and whatnot. And I would argue that not all regulations are created equal. Some I think provide value and some do not. At its best, regulations can help promote quality, vibrant communities as they're being built. But I think they all cost money to comply with. But I'm curious your thoughts on the argument that when a regulation costs money to comply with, it also decreases the market value of the land. Or the flip side of that, we could take something that right now is, perhaps zoned for 4 units to the acre, and we've got a land price that's on that. We could change the zone and allow, a developer to put as much density as they want on that land. But by doing so, the price of that land is going to skyrocket, and the developer would buy that land at much higher prices. And so in some ways, I feel like taking away some of these regulations or whatever doesn't necessarily directly lower the cost of housing, because of that market adjustment. And anyway, so I'm curious, is that a bad argument, or how would you respond to that?
Well, that's an observation. Yeah, I think it's well placed, and you know, I retreat to that standard phrase of all economists. It all depends, you know, on what you do. And we have tried in the past to put numbers on various changes in regulation. And what is the cost of development cost? What about fees, inspection fees, and so on? What does that do to the price of the home? And that is a nightmare, trying to get in and make any sort of comparability between Provo and Orem or Sandy. Excuse me, it's just impossible to do. And just like you say, some increased costs might hinder affordability, where others actually could promote affordability. But it just really depends on the situation. And we have tried to generalize on that, and it's a nightmare, and we usually retreat. Excuse me.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Our next item of business today is slated until 3 o'clock, and we've got a presentation on the housing development process with varied and mixed housing types presented by David Gardner, president at David D. Gardner and Associates Incorporated, and John Dester, president at Georgetown Development, Inc. Do we have those presenters here?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
While they're getting ready, reason we invited these two gentlemen up is they are local developers, and we wanted to give a sense of, help you understand as a council, kind of the cost structures that these gentlemen work with as they're trying to build housing and such. So this is just another continuation of our ongoing workshop on development.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. John and I have been stressing about this for the last week now. So, and we have nothing at risk, but it's still stressful. Anyway, John's going to start out with a presentation of different projects that have been done. I would then step in with a project that could possibly happen and show you how the numbers work. So,
thank you.
Yeah,
we need you into the microphone. So
I don't know why I envisioned just sitting here. And this is a pointer that would, is it a laser pointer?
So it's a laser pointer that'll catch it up on the screen, but it won't show on our broadcast. So if you, it's helpful if you point and kind of describe where you're at. And then if you see the left and right arrows on that little pointer.
Yes.
That should move the presentation forward or back.
Oh, set the stage before I tie into that. That was really appropriate. I mean, we should have been here for that whole thing to hear Jim talk about that. The issues that I wrote down that we would talk about are scarce land. I think I've watched this now for 40 years building here. We have mountains on the east side and a lake on the west side. And if you think about it and envision our little valley's kind of the same circumstance as the Bay Area. You got the Bay and you've got those coastal mountains, and squeezed in between, there's only so much land. So that's a really big problem for all of us now. After all these years, I just see it all being used up. And that's in every zone we have. It's scarce. You've got NIMBYism, if you will, running rampant, and there's a lot of misperceptions that just continually occur. So I'm going to make the case, I hope to you, that Provo needs all types of housing, and we're short of just every kind. Single family, detached on big lots is always in demand. But I see, especially now that I'm trying to retire and getting older, retirement-ready houses are popular. And the townhomes of all sizes, we're building all sizes of those right now. condos and apartments, I don't really know, and we won't speak to that. But whatever the type is, anything at all that we all can do for affordability, to make it more affordable. When we talk about the median price or whatever being 500,000, that doesn't sound to any of us like affordable. But I think all we're trying to talk about is anything that can be done to make things more affordable would be a good goal. So with that, what we did is we kind of looked at just whatever case studies we could come up with to be efficient with our time and share with you decisions that are made that affects the pricing of the homes. So the first study is just this little leftover green piece that you see right there. Is over by 5th West and 3rd North, and there were 2 old houses that someone tore down, and then they came to us and said, what could you do with it? So we could build 1 house there, we could build another house there, 2 houses, or we could propose something like this, where we said, well, how about if we do 7 townhomes? And we did the renderings on top, and thankfully this project got approved, and we put 7 townhomes in there that look like what you see. The thing I want you to know is that all 7 townhomes are still owner occupied, and they're the same owners that were there 5 years ago. So it's just a choice. It's a type of housing that those 7 owners chose, and that's what it looks like today. The parking lot's actually the office building to the west. This is where there was a choice of doing 12 large homes. Some of you may have been on the council when I was in here a couple of years ago with this. And there was 3.7 acres. We could do 12 lots, R110 style lots. They would have potential home coverage like you see in that slide and this slide, to where we've even built big homes in this very neighborhood in the last year, and they're really big. I mean, you max out whatever buildable area you've got, you max it out with 3 or 4 car garages. And anyway, that didn't get built. I spoke at the time about the problem with cul-de-sacs and parking, and you can see this cul-de-sac, people are parking perpendicular to the curb. And when it's obvious that there's no parking on the cul-de-sac, the cars park out on the adjacent street that feeds the cul-de-sac. This is what you approved. This is what we've built. This is at the time a model we built of what we wanted it to look like. And that's a little drone picture I took a couple weeks ago of. That's what it is. We are building the 18 homes in there, and the buyers did turn out to be largely retirees. All 18 are sold. 12 out of 18 are absolutely retired now or retiring within the next year. And then the other 6 are just looking forward to retirement, but they chose because they chose now that they know in the next 10 years they'll retire. We have about 4 or 5 families like that. The thing that happened is, as we look back and I built these other houses in the neighborhood, those houses are significantly more. They're on single family lots, and they were really, at the end of the day, they were 800,000 to $1 million is what they turned out to be. And they're within a stone's throw of these houses. So these houses have sold for anywhere from $450 or so to $650. The majority of these sold for that. Some a bit more if you finish the basement. But my point is that by doing it that way and doing 18 smaller houses, we were able to deliver product at a lower price point than had we done the 12 big lots. This is another one, 8 versus 21 or 12. There's 8 lots sitting up on 4750 North. I was approached a year ago or so by the owner of those lots. The problem was they weren't selling. The reason they weren't selling is they were plotted there as a buffer because there's a huge apartment complex just to the north side of them, across from the Riverwoods shopping thing. Anyway, they weren't selling, and he asked, what could we do to it? And we said, well, we actually had 3 or 4 different plans, but this one was on the top. We could do 21 big townhomes. These are front loaded, but they're very large townhomes. Or we could do 12 more of those heirloom houses that I just showed you that we have up in my neighborhood. And at the end of the day, they chose to keep trying to sell the 8 lots. And there's only 1 house under construction there right now. a year later. I don't know. They're stuck with it now and they're going to do that. But one of the staff members mentioned to me that either the first house that's underway or one that's being permitted is a house where they came in and said, could we build a 4-car garage and build our house on top of that? So the funny thing is that I know what that looks like because we had seen that in a duplex form. And you're seeing 2 units there and 2 more, but that's essentially a 4-car garage with a house on top of it. And I don't think it's very attractive. So I think there were other ideas. Those 8 lots are going to sell slowly because everything in Provo will sell, but they're going to sell slowly and maybe there'll be some innovative, if you'll call it that, uses. This is a common formula. The garage, the entry door, the garage, the entry door. Way too much of it is executed, I'd just say, in this way, where you have garage doors lined up and man doors next door to it. That ends up a lot of times in an all concrete front yard because you got to get the cars in the driveways. They just end up being rows of garage doors and man doors. And yeah, you got a 2-car garage, you got a 2-car driveway in front of the garage door. So you do qualify for 4 spaces. That's important. We know that's important too. And it's a good idea, but you got to do it in some way other than what you're seeing in those pictures. We don't like this either. No backyards, no fences, not even a private patio. And those of you that have been in the military, maybe that's looking a little familiar to you. Use it in the same formula though, with a garage door, garage entry, but much more appealing is something that Brandon and I found when we were in Atlanta. And I said, holy cow, that's that garage door, man door, then garage door and entry door layout. But you don't have that sense of it right off when you see these houses. So it is the same exact formula, but good architecture and design helps so much. These all had private backyards that are fenced, so people can do things like this in their backyard. And we think this is a good idea. Those are townhouses on the right-hand side. Half their backyard is kind of tucked underneath the deck and the other is exposed. So if you do the better architecture, you just get buried exteriors and private yards, the things that I've talked about. And they become more affordable than a single-family detached home. 11 versus maybe 19. This is a 3.7 acre parcel next to I-15. We could go in and build 11 R18 lots in that subdivision. This is one where I'm going to give you some numbers and how this works. Or you could do that and propose something along those lines with 19 pocket. It was, we worked with the staff to kind of come up with a pocket neighborhood idea that would result in a central community park that can look like these. These are different slides that we've taken as we travel and see the execution of this idea. Everybody gets a private yard that's fenced, and so the shorter fences enable people to talk across the top of the fence better. So if this were done, you'd have a community orchard, garden plots planned for each one of the houses. So, well, they don't have large yards, but you can see the light green area are the fenced areas for each home. You'd end up with an expanded, as it turns out, there's a city park north of that, and it would be expanded with a pavilion and additional parking. So we'll talk numbers for a second. And I think we have a highlighted one that just shows a little better. If you do 11 lots and the total cost to develop 11 lots, each lot is $131,945. If you can sell them for 150, and the difficulty with this is always we look at the neighborhood and what's surrounding it, especially if it's infill, then you've already got your neighborhood. You know what you're dealing with. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? But if you can sell those lots for 150, make $18,000 on each lot, then the total profit on 11 of those would be nearly $200,000. If you do option B, you take the same ground cost, your land cost is $31,600 per unit instead of $54,500. So your total cost per pad's $91,000. If you can sell those for $100,000 or budget $100,000 in the sales price of the home that you build, there's $8,900 profit in each of those, but because there's 19 now, you end up with 169,000. It's interesting that they're really so close. I found that to be the case, though, when we did a study of, do I build 12 lots or do I build 18 on the heirloom project? The amount of money was exactly the same. When we did that study, it was the same. It didn't matter. In this, it's very similar as well. Now, but the difference really is when you get to this, if you have $150,000 lots and you use the old rule of about it's 1/4 of the cost of the home. Well, you should be putting $600,000 homes on there. But along with what Jim was just telling us, the high construction cost, aside from land going through the roof, the high construction cost now really, as we analyze it, the $600,000 product of a few years ago, we would have to say, we have to price that at $670,000. So go to option B, $100,000 pad times 4. The home would be about $400,000. Sadly, it's not going to be. It's going to be $460,000. So when we look at that particular neighborhood, we're faced with, do we build $460,000 pocket houses or do we build $670,000? But you see there's a $200,000 difference in the offering. So that's something where we all could sit and think about it. Would we rather offer 19 pocket houses that could be priced $200,000 cheaper? You get the idea. Dave's going to take this over. He's looking at literally yesterday. He was doing this. Here's your front and back.
Oh, okay, great. My drawings are not as nice as John's. So this is a hypothetical, although this is a real piece of property. It's 9.2 acres. It's under contract for just under $200,000 an acre, which is a reasonable price in this market. Its density is 3.26 units per acre. It's a standard development. It's a nothing to see here development. But we started to play with it and came up with, what if we could do 44 pads instead of 30 lots? 44 pads would still be single family detached. They're 12 foot apart, the houses. They're still low density. It'd be 4.8 units per acre. So anything under 5 is usually considered low density, but the 44 pads though put us in a different market. We can hit a more affordable. It's not affordable in my opinion, but it's closer. Let me just put them side by side here. We got on the subdivision lots, you've got public streets throughout. You have no open space. Your large lot, they're all large lots. They're 9,600 square feet for the smallest, up to 12,800 for the largest. They're completely water guzzling lots because people will plant their Kentucky bluegrass out the back for 100 feet. And the 44 pads, they are rear loaded, 2-car garage, so they don't have the front loaded, although that might be a design that would work here because like John showed you, that front loaded can be very attractive if it's done right. But these are proposed to be rear loaded. There's a huge amount of open space in the middle. You can't really see that. I mean, you can see it if you know what you're looking for. That is 130 feet across from the front porch to the front porch. It's a huge area that you could put in a trail with trees on both sides, with ground cover on part of it, minimizing your bluegrass. You could do xeriscape around the house and it would look terrific. This also has room for community gardens, has room for other common areas. This type of layout creates some more of a feeling of community than you would have in the standard subdivision. Honestly, the standard subdivision, you get that sense of community through the church. That's, you meet on Sundays and then, but this is a, but by design, this can get a sense of community every day of the week. This could have community gardens. This has public streets, but it also has alleyways. So here's some numbers. On the 30-lot subdivision, you factor in the price, the purchase price, you are at $60,000 per lot for the 30 lots on the just the land cost. Your soft costs, which includes all your preliminary things before you even know you've got a project that you've got to invest at least part of that money. That works out to be $3,700 for your soft costs. Your improvement costs, which in this case is the biggest cost because I'm not going to get into the building. This would be lots that you would just put up for sale to builders. We're at almost $70,000 improvement costs. That is a number that has jumped over the last year or so, but that's a realistic number for this kind of project. Our total cost in real numbers would be just over $4 million. So that's the cost we would be looking at to get the product ready to sell. So the revenues, what if we could get $180,000 a lot? I'm not sure we could, but with the way things are going, we might. It's at least it's a possibility. At $180,000 a lot, and the 1/4 price, the old rule of thumb, which is a lot more flexible than it used to be. That gives us a $720,000 house. That's just outrageous. These numbers may not be exact on each column, but they're awfully close. They're in the ballpark. I'm not far off on this.
Can I interrupt you real quick with a quick question? So to Mr. Harding's question before, or a comment that he made to Mr. Wood. So if your lot improvement costs have risen substantially that you just mentioned, whether or not they had or hadn't, so take that aside and just say, look, whether or not those costs have increased substantially or not, which we know they have, but whether or not they had or hadn't, would that change what the market rate for your lot, an improved lot, would be? Because wouldn't you take it to market at whatever the market would pay you for that lot? I mean, sometimes when we talk through this, I get the sense that you guys have a fixed profit margin that you're trying to hit, but that doesn't make any sense to me. The reality is you'll sell it for whatever you can sell it for. Is that correct? Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm just saying that in a normal situation, if we were taking this subdivision through, knew that we could get the improvements in, got bids on it for the 2 million plus for the improvement costs, we'd feel good about being able to sell them for 180. If we could get 185, we'd sell them for 185.
Right.
If we could only get 175, which is also a possibility, then we would still make a profit, but it wouldn't be the $1 million profit. It'd be 800,000. Still probably worth doing.
Yeah.
But then you're starting to evaluate, is this going to be worth it? Because the risk factor of things changing in the market is something that you lose sleep over.
Thank you, Mr. Strachan.
So as we looked at these various pro formas, your profit's been higher in many cases on the smaller or the larger product on a smaller on the fewer lots, right? Because you're going up in price. For example, the one you showed earlier of 670,000 versus 460,000. Your profit was higher overall on the more expensive project. As a developer, why would you want to go for the smaller or the more lots if your profit's going to be larger on the other?
Because your buyers, your market for the buyers, the number of buyers that can afford the higher price is less.
So it's easier to sell a lot more units at a smaller. Okay.
And the quicker it sells, the more you reduce your risk.
Okay.
And any developer that would stand up here was going to tell you the first thing they worry about is the risk. There's too many unknowns, too many things that can go sideways on you. And then when you have a bad project, it takes a long time to get over that.
So another question then, so we talked about the infrastructure costs in and around the building. When you have the back alley, now I've got a house that's very typical of the 1998 era, where I've got a giant garage out front and then the whole house is in behind. And it was what I could afford at the time, but I hate it, right? It's just aesthetically, it's not pleasing. How does the cost structure work differently if you have the alleys in behind for what you call back rear loaded?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's in let me just get to the next slide. Oh, that highlights the price of the 180 per lot. Okay, so this is the 44 pads. Now our improvement costs are have just bumped up because I have an extra alley that I have to put in over and above the public streets. So now I am at 4.6 million instead of just over 4 million. So there's another $600,000, which I can tell you exactly what that is. It's the alleys and it's the huge open space that we would have to landscape. So that's where most of that difference comes.
Could I ask another question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, these questions are good.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Kentlands in Gaithersburg, Maryland, but my son-in-law and daughter lived there for a while, and they have these, they call them mews, sort of these back alleys behind the properties, and the houses are very close together, very, very lovely, very communal, lots of parks and gardens and so on. Yeah. My question is, I mean, when I see something like that, and when I see these projects you're talking about, and I was on the council when that project on Timpview Drive was being debated and was approved. I know 2 people who've moved in there who love it, and I've visited the homes. I think they look lovely. So I really would love to see more projects like it. I guess the golden question is, how do we incentivize it? Because I don't know that we get a lot of these, and I don't know that every developer is as creative as these projects are, and so we get sort of cookie cutter developments.
Exactly.
And it seems adequate. It seems like someone's willing to do it, and it's going to get us a certain kind of housing type that we need, but it's not really something that puts a smile on my face and makes me feel very proud. And I don't know how to sort of create the momentum and the incentives that we need as a city council to say, we want lots of this creativity rather than just every once in a while a nice little project. Maybe that's not answerable, but if you have any insights, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think Councilmember Harding has at least the seed of the idea. You need to start off with a fairly low density that isn't an incentive to the developer, less than 3 units per acre. And that's what you'll allow unless the developer sits down with the staff and hammers out something better. You got a good staff here, probably the best in the valley. They can hammer out ways of getting a better product if they know that they'll be backed up. So by telegraphing, yeah, we're going to give you 6 units an acre, you've lost your leverage. If you put down in your, well, like you were saying, Mr. Harding, is you put down, this is kind of what we want. If you don't want to do that, then do your 2.8 unit subdivision and we'll live with it. Other than, in my opinion, that's a waste of water, but I'm paranoid about water the last few years. So there are ways to do this, and really, I don't think you can pass an ordinance that covers everything. It's just too complicated. But to set out the goal, we want quality development. We want development with good design. I like that idea since I'm not quite as retired as John, but I like to see good design. And if it happens, it's a benefit to everybody. So anyway, I'm worried about going too long here. So let me just finish this up.
We've got a few minutes. Thank you. Did you have a follow-up? Okay.
Okay, so on the 44 pads, could we get $140,000 per lot? I don't think so. But I put that in there because if you go any lower, it wipes the profit out. And we can't do that. But if you stay at 140 and you build a slightly smaller house because your lot price is lower, one of the things we don't realize that if you're paying $180,000 for the lot, you're not going to make your house smaller. You're going to build it to reflect that value of the lot. So, but when you do these pads, you've got a lot more freedom to do a smaller unit for the customer that needs it a little more affordable, do a bigger unit for the customer that wants more stuff. So anyway, at 140, that means we would be in the little over $500,000 range for the house. And I think, again, if you take the size down a little bit, you'd be doing okay. And you could stay under 400 or under 500,000. So, help.
Can I ask a quick question, just clarifying question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I wasn't doing it right.
Mr. Gardner, before you go on, just a quick question. The difference between the 30 lots and the 44 pads, did you have a different in land, raw land
Yes.
cost?
Raw land cost now is 40,000 instead of 60,000.
Not per lot, but per acre, just that very top one. Oh, perfect. So you have the land cost, the raw land cost is the same.
Yeah, because it's the same whether it's not contingent on the size of the development.
Thank you.
Okay, so anyway, I've messed up my presentation, so you just have to take my word for it. It had a dramatic climax.
I think we were getting it.
No, I think we covered it. We're okay.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we have about 10 minutes. If I go really fast, we probably can get through it in 10 minutes if you have it. If you don't, we do it another time.
Can we cut that and say, let's try to do it in 5?
Let's speed through it.
Thanks.
So every parcel we look at has this many, and in fact, you can get a copy of this and look at it later. That's the thing. We just have all these vulnerabilities. And so go back and take a look at this, but it's risky. So we analyze all of this stuff and it's all so different. I just put in there, it's never easy. But let me go through really quickly some additional examples since you posed and kind of postulated about what could be done and where could you help. I put these pictures in as single family detached homes. And then I realized, oh, these are actually attached, but they look like they're single family detached homes. So even though they're attached and you can't see in the back, but they look like they present themselves as single family detached. That's single family, small front yard, but full two-car garages, two-car driveways. These happen to be in front and behind each other in a pinwheel like I did at Heirloom. But these are large homes and substantial, but they're on a smaller lot. Now, to some people, that's appealing. That is actually single family home detached. You see the one next to it? There's a row of them. They look like townhouses, except they're single family detached. They're just on a smaller lot. So it helps. Obviously, that looks like a giant townhouse, but it's a single family detached home. All of those that's the rear view of some of them. They're all single family detached. Front loaded. So all of those I want you to see are in projects that are really creative, small yards. Anyway, now you go to townhomes, and townhomes will enable you to aggregate and consolidate more open space because the footprint of the houses are taking up less space. You can then consolidate it. Look to the right side there. These balconies in this case and the front porches, that's really a popular thing to have big front porches and balconies. They're useful, and look what they're looking out over. Those were looking out over a big park. I'll show you again in a second. These townhouses are rear loaded, but they have something called a sky terrace up on top. See that top floor? They may not have a large front yard or side yards, but what they have is up on the top, outdoor and indoor. On each one of them, you have both of those capabilities up there. That looks like a garage on the top. That's just the enclosed part. Then you have the open. These are really big, almost like estate-sized townhouses. And they also featured the sky terrace up on top, which I'm not sure I love that architecture. But I mean, I like the architecture. I'm not sure I like how they did those sky terraces. Nevertheless, it's creative. These have your two-car garage and you build over the top of it. And there's efficiencies to that, of course, building on top of the garage. And then you have garage door, again, man door, garage door, another unit, and then the garage. But doing it that way, you're using less land and still delivering a rather large single-family house. These are quite big. Placing them this way, I'm going to go back one second. Those have garages in between each townhome. So you have a townhome, townhome, garage. It's still a nice look, but nobody's house is next to another house. There's a garage in between each one. When you aggregate them and do that, you get a big park. You can sometimes, that's a pool that's next to that park. It's all a part of that particular project. Let me tell you a couple of things you guys, not you, but previous councils did. There was this leftover triangular piece of property down by an industrial area, I-15. The railroad tracks are on the east side, I-15's on the west. It was a leftover piece. Who was occupying that were homeless people. All along the railroad tracks in the trees, there were homeless people. Your building inspector, Brent Taylor, lived across the street in a very nice project that he built. With that, I went ahead and took a chance and built these townhouses down there in that project. And I tell you, Brent would tell you, it changed the whole neighborhood by having owner occupied people that live there and take pride of ownership move in. Before we did that, when we did this one though, do you see the little L-shaped project that's, what is that? Liberty Place. We had Jones Paint and Glass Industry to the south. We had a trailer park with the attendant sad problems that come from that on the west. And all of the houses to the east, really those rooftops you see there, if you look closely, they're all duplexes. So we put this in, and again, I mean, that's what it looks like now that we're finished. This is really neat. This is what it looks like at night. So I want to just mention that one of the nicest letters I ever received, I received some nasty ones, but one of the nicest was a ecclesiastical leader for the area and of the broad area. And what he was praising were the people who moved in. So he loved the project and he loved the result. But what was neat about the letter is he just said, listen, we got so many high quality families that moved into that neighborhood that it completely transformed the broader neighborhood. And the welfare problems that they had were solved by the people who moved in. So that's where it makes a difference. If you can look at challenged neighborhoods and see the potential, and there's always going to be opposition. Read our list of challenges. Now, we don't want to do this. We don't ever want to see this. But that has parking in the front too. So the possibilities, those are the extremes in design. And that's really all I wanted to share with you. Go back and look at our cramped area, use your staff. When you say, what can we do? The staff is the filter. I mean, those guys, they're probably kicking some really bad projects out of the way before it ever gets to you. But if they ever see a good one or that has merit, I hope they kick it up and that you listen to the staff. I mean, they're trained for it. So think about affordability. And all I mean there is improve the affordability, because we're all having a hard time delivering anything that's affordable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. For staff, if I may make a request, if we have the slides, I would love us to just review them for purposes of whether or not Provo would allow them from a zoning standpoint. So any of those pictures, I just kept looking at them thinking, well, would our zoning, would we allow that? Would we allow that? Would we allow that? It'd be great if we could just have some context on some of those, because I'm sure they were from outside of Provo, whether or not we can even do, some of that or need to change some of our rules to be able to make that happen. Other comments or questions before we wrap this up? Mr. Harding?
The flip side of that is they also showed some atrocious development, and some that looks very familiar with what we have in Provo. And I'm curious, does our zoning protect us from some of those really bad examples? So that might be part of that analysis as well.
In other words, the zoning doesn't always protect. So you get some of that stuff that doesn't.
Yeah, I do want to get Mr. Dester and Mr. Gardner's feedback on something. I was going to ask about land costs. I think one of the struggles I have with that is, like you showed, like, hey, we've got 30 lots or 44 pads, but you show the same price on the land. I fear that sometimes when we put the zoning in that allows the 44, then immediately the land price goes up and decreases the affordability. But I do appreciate the comment of perhaps you zone it for 3 units to the acre, but signal that you're willing to go more with that.
If it's a well-designed project.
I think that's great. I think Mr. Shipley asked a question that I wanted to get at, and maybe just a nod on this, but, say you got a great price on land, or, the city waives some fees looking for affordability, and this is not a commitment, but just a general take on the industry, those homes would still sell for the market price, not, if we waive fees,
a great price on the land to us is a good day. And we wouldn't necessarily pass that on.
Right. Okay,
but what we were showing, and I know they were kind of grainy, those performers, you couldn't really see the numbers very well. I'd like to leave those with you and then see if you look those over, if you have questions. But we, at the 200,000 an acre in today's market, that is a reasonable price. It's not a great deal, but it's not a bad deal. And I did have, for the 44 units, a $40,000 raw land price per unit. And for the 30 units, it was a $60,000 with rough numbers. So that saved 20 grand that didn't come into my pocket necessarily. It just made it so that we could do a project that was, we were going to be able to hit a market where there was enough buyers that we could get out of it quickly.
Okay, thank you. The thing that I would like the feedback from you two is we saw some beautiful pictures, some townhome projects, some heirloom type, I'll call them, projects, some pocket house projects. But each of those projects were kind of fairly uniform within that project. They were all townhomes, or they were all heirlooms, or they were all pocket houses. Is there any possibility to get a project like that maybe has some townhomes and some heirloom type and some pocket type, or broader difference in housing sizes?
Yeah, the examples that I gave were really tiny infills. Think about it. Every 3 or 4 out of the 5 or all of them are infills. Dave's working on one right now that could be bigger. And so as we talked about it yesterday and this morning, we put on the other hat, like, how would we do this and what could happen? Because it might be 10 to 19 acres. Oh, then exactly, it should be more varied product. And that would meet the needs of the city better and everything. If you had, anything over 5 acres and you're starting to get into where you can do more than one product and have it look good and function. The only thing I thought of a minute ago was years ago, we had roundtables, and those roundtables, it might have been so long ago that Dave Gardner was on the planning staff and Bill was where I am, doing projects. But I was going to say, if you guys really want a lot of information and let it go in whatever direction you want in asking questions, we got to do roundtables, less formal. We don't come prepared with a bunch of stuff, but we're prepared to answer your questions. That way, whatever's on your mind. So Dave and I really stressed out about this thing. Funny, there's nothing at stake. We don't have any, but we have been really stressed out. So it's going to be relaxing. And we said, we're never doing this again. Too much stress. And here I am saying, why don't we do a round table and sit around? But it would be less stressful. And it might be more productive for you to get your individual, if we had a round table and we literally sat around and talked about it and brainstormed rather than this format.
Thank you very much.
We could probably get them to come back either to the zoning and or housing committees to do that with a smaller group.
That'd be great. Yep. I think we're all for smaller groups and less formal and be able to discuss. So appreciate your time, both of you. I'm sorry it stressed you out. I thought it was a great discussion, learned a lot. So thank you. We're now a little bit behind. We'll take a 5-minute break. Let's go ahead and, what does 5 minutes mean? Let's go ahead and be back by 3:25. Let's restart at 3:25 and let's see if we can cut things short to get to the Provo School District by 4 still. So we'll need to go fast and furious from here. Break and then 3:25.
Recording stopped.
Movie reference, Fast and Furious. will be presented by Brian Jones, Provo City Attorney.
I am here. It just took me a minute to start my video. Okay, I'll try to save you some time and be really quick on this. I think everyone has probably seen the memo, which pretty much lays out the issue. There's a tow company in Provo that's approached the city council and asked for changes to city code that originated back in 2013, or 2014, I guess. As you recall, the city council at Mayor Curtis's request back then passed some towing restrictions, one of which applies only to tows on residential properties of 4 or more units where the tow is not personally requested by someone, but is done while a tow company is patrolling the property. That requirement, those requirements include requiring that can only be done if the tow company has a contract with the property owner, and that contract must limit the fees. The fees were capped at $175 for a tow and $60 for a boot back in 2014, which at the time was about 82% of what the state actually allowed. Because the state maximums have gone up, those same dollar amounts now amount to about 72% of what the state allows. So for instance, if you wanted to keep the percentage the same, those maximums would go up to about $198 and $70 respectively. I'm trying to think what other data points you might have. I probably just want to answer questions at this point, but again, the discussion point for the council is the options are disregard the request and not make any changes, make a change, and you could do that by either getting rid of the caps entirely, or you could do that by adjusting the caps either to a new fixed dollar amount or as a percentage of the state maximums so that they would go up as the state maximums go up. What questions can I answer?
Questions from the council? Maybe I'll just start. Brian, are we at risk of the state disallowing our rule because we're not even close to theirs?
Well, I mean, that's been something that the tow companies have been lobbying for. The tow lobby has been lobbying for years. And so I think that's always, anything that we do that deviates from what the state allows always creates some risk of that. The more we deviate, the greater the risk. So certainly I think if it gets to the point where there's a big discrepancy between what we allow and what the state allows, that could cause a problem. Now, again, recognize that these caps are targeted specifically to try to avoid what Mayor Curtis referred to when he proposed these as predatory towing. That they only apply to patrol towing in apartment complexes, basically. So, that would be kind of our defense if a lobbying event started up.
Other questions? Online? Here at the dial, okay. Yeah, Cliff.
So Brian, in effect, if we let the rates stay low compared to the state rate, we're discouraging predatory towing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably right. I think you are disincentivizing people or tow companies from doing patrol tows because it limits the amount that they can recover on those. I think there was definitely an intent back when these ordinances were passed, which include other requirements besides just these fee caps. I think the intent was, well, let me put it this way. I think Mayor Curtis said, during those discussions, look, if the property owner calls up the tow company and says, "Come get this car," then there's no reason to disincentivize that at all. But we had, Mayor Curtis opened up this for public comment, and I think he got a stack of paper about this big of complaints about many of which were tows that were happening in the patrol setting, where the general feeling was the property owner probably didn't even want that tow to take place. Now, we can have a discussion about whether that's really true or not, but the general sense was there was a lot of towing happening in circumstances like a church bishop pulling up in front of the apartment of someone who was sick, walking to the door to give them the soup, walking back to the car and having the car be towed. Or the back tire was 6 inches over the yellow line in the parking space. And so there was a sense that there should be some more a disincentive for that kind of towing as compared to others.
Brian, what's the approximate percentage we're at right now?
About 72%.
And we started out about 80?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
Put in, I guess answering that question in real dollars, if we adjusted it percentage wise, they'd be allowed to charge up to $23 more per tow and $10 more per boot.
Okay. And so at this point, it's on the council to make the change if they want, to come forward with the change, or to just leave it as is.
Right.
Okay. We'll look for feedback from the council then if people do want to make a change, and appreciate your time today. Thanks, Mr. Jones.
Happy to.
Okay. We'll go ahead and go to the next item of business. We're skipping for now item 7. We'll go ahead and put it back on the end of the schedule, but the next item of business is number 8, a presentation on Provo Sustainability Committee's request for council support of a program providing rainwater harvesting barrels to citizens for a discounted rate. This will be presented by Mr. Don Jarvis, on the mayor's sustainability. Oh, he is the mayor's sustainability advisor. Excuse me. Thank you, Don, for coming.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time. It looks like I've really drawn a crowd today.
They're all listening.
Yes.
Just not here.
Oh, okay. That's good. About 20 years ago, I decided that I ought to buy a rain barrel because I would capture some water that just falls on my roof and rolls off. And I understand that there's some improvement in water quality because if you capture your own rainwater, there's a little less chance of the junk that's on your roof getting into the water system. And so I bought this rain barrel 20 years ago. It cost me about $320, and it has no way I can get off the top off. It's not very quality. Well, when I heard about the Utah Rivers Council offering rain barrels for $83, and then if the cities are often adding a little incentive and offering it to citizens for $50, I thought, man, what's a really good deal. It not only, of course, saves some amount of water. I won't pretend that it's a huge amount of water, but I don't do anything with my rain barrel except to use the water in it to water my houseplants. But that's 4 gallons a week times 52. That's over 200 gallons a year. It's not a huge amount, but it does save a little. And they claim that between 15,000 to 22,000, almost 23,000 gallons of rainwater fall on a house or along the Wasatch Front. So, we're not going to be capturing all of it. And my rain barrel is full a lot of time, but I think the main value of this is to raise people's awareness of the importance of saving water, doing what you can. So it's a consciousness raising activity. The good news is it doesn't cost the city anything more than what you want to put in as far as an incentive. It all comes in a big semi on one Saturday. Volunteers there help unload the barrels to people. There's no storage. The Utah Rivers Council, as you saw, does 2-3 rounds of press releases. The city advertises it on social media for 6 to 8 weeks, and it's all done in March or April of 2022 if we decide to do it. And I think we'd be crazy not to do something with it. This is a great little program, and it's been done in many cities along the Wasatch Front. And most of them do incentivize it down to $50 a barrel. But some of them just say, well, let's just get it at the bargain basement wholesale price. These barrels cost something like 150, I think, if they're not wholesale. And then with the Utah Rivers Council discount, we get them for $83 a barrel. Questions?
Questions from the council? Mr. Harding?
I too have a rain barrel.
Good for you.
Yeah, I have a
Start a club.
I have a swamp cooler, and every 6 hours of running, it dumps all the water and refills it. And so not only am I catching the rainwater, I'm also catching and I water my garden with it. So it works out great.
That's what happens when you're an engineer. You're better than us humanities types.
I followed the link on the information that you sent us, and it looks like perhaps the price has gone up this year because they're still advertising it at 75.
Yeah, it's 83.
Okay. I am definitely supportive of this. At least of the 85. I think we should have a conversation about if we want to subsidize that to less. But I do think, broadly, at the very least, I think we should participate and work with the organization to make it available to our residents.
And as you know, the Sustainability Committee suggested that we subsidize 150 barrels to bring it down to $50 a barrel, which people will do anything for a small bargain. And so this gets people in. And then if more people want, then they just pay the $83 and away we go. So so the total, we're asking for something like $5,000 total. So
Have these barrels been promoted in the past from Provo City?
No, we've never done
Any
this
advertising or anything?
This is so much superior to my barrel. I can't believe it. They have sort of a funnel top with a screen to keep the mosquitoes from breeding there. And you can take it off. I can't take the top off my barrel, and it gets fungus inside it, and it kills some seedlings I plant. This is an excellent thing. And then when it gets over to certain amount, then you can see from the picture I sent, there's a little hose that drains off around, so it's really a really good quality. The rain barrels are made from recycled plastic. They're black. It's not to like.
Other questions from the council? Mr. Henry?
Yeah, I really like this program, and I want to do it. I'm certainly interested in the idea of an incentive from the city to kickstart it, if that is possible for us. I don't know at what point we would have to make the decision about a $5,000 investment or some other amount, if at all. Do we have a sense of when we would need to make that decision? And if so, do we have some creative ideas about where that money would come from?
Good questions. Timing.
I'm sorry, I don't know the exact deadline for applying, but they do sell out. So it'd be good not to wait very long. I think within a month or two, we ought to decide whether they want to do it or not.
But that would be the preliminary, the first order of business, right? The secondary order of business would be to decide whether or not we're going to further invest in the discount.
If, with your permission, I'd be happy to tell them that we want to do this. We don't know exactly how much we want to put in on it, but we want to do it. Put us down for 150 barrels, and then the council could decide how much they want to subsidize them.
Is 150 the minimum to get the discount?
No.
Okay. No. I just wonder if there's a number we have to get to.
No. That's just a kind of good round number.
Question of funding suggestions.
I'm just wondering, division of responsibilities, if this is a role for the council. Obviously, if we're going to subsidize it, if we're going to appropriate money for the subsidization, that's a council role. But participation in the program, I wonder if that's an administrative decision. And I don't know the answer to that. The other thing is, it seems like there was something in the past where we were talking about, and I thought a department came forward and said, well, actually, we have a fund that we need to find these types of projects for, or whatever. I don't know if that was energy or whatnot. So again, it kind of back to the administration. I wonder if it's something that we express interest in and then ask the administration to take a look at where that might fit in well, and if it fits in, and if we need to appropriate some additional money to do.
Does the administration want to speak to that?
Yeah, we'd be happy to take a look at that. Isaac and I were just chatting. This is the first we've heard about the proposal, so it would be good to maybe give us a little time to work through it and think about the logistics of how that might work. And we'd be happy to come back and visit with you about that.
Thank you.
The good news is that there's very little the city has to do except to allow a place for the exchange to take place, and little work from the mayor's information officer to get the word out. That's about all. Yeah. I think again, just the issue of again how we would make the financial transaction. Is that one transaction with the Rivers Council, or is it, and how do we guarantee that it's actually Provo people who are getting the benefit, as opposed to somebody's, paying $83 and submitting something to us to get $33 back? I think we just want to think through how we might structure that. So, yeah, I think they have a way of doing that. Okay, checking on that, but I need to do a little research and let us know if they've got a system already in place. That's great. They've done this at a lot of cities, and they know they don't want people coming in just from anywhere. Okay, Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm generally supportive of this, and Mr. Strachan mentioned we might be able to fund this from the neighborhood matching grant program, and I think that would be a worthwhile expenditure, or if there's better alternatives, I'm open to that.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, we'll circle back on that.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Shipley.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvis.
Mr. Shipley,
let's go back.
We find ourselves early, which means if Karen's ready, you might want to just slip her back into the agenda.
Is Karen ready?
And Councilor Ellsworth's hand is up. Not anymore.
That's from her comment. Let's go ahead and take Karen at this time. And this item is a presentation on the updates regarding City Council communications, presented by Karen Tapahi, Community Relations Coordinator. Karen?
Hi, thank you, everyone. So I haven't done a communications update for several years and wanted to kind of catch everybody up to how far we've come. My position was created in 2014, combining communications and coordinating the neighborhood program. That's why I have the fun title of Community Relations Coordinator. They actually go really well together, and you'll see that as I move along. So let's see. There we go. Where we started in 2014, when I got here, we had Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and a blog for the City Council, and those were all working just fine. And next. Now we have lots of extra squares. We added Instagram, emailed newsletters, an email address that goes to all 7 councilors, the citizens agenda, our open city hall, and then Linktree, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Next slide. So when it came to broadcasting meetings, early on, it took several computers and webcams, and we used Google Hangouts on air. It was an interesting setup to work with, but I'm really impressed with the innovations by the staff that came before me to put all this together and get our meetings out to the public. Next slide. Then we were able to, with the help of our media services manager, Brett Borgett, he was able to upgrade us to using actual broadcast equipment for our work meetings. Of course, they already had that for the chambers, but this was something new for the council conference room. And he got this upgraded in a very budget friendly way. And then, of course, he's kept us going in an amazing way during the pandemic. Next slide. So as you can see, we've had a couple different looks during the pandemic. The Brady Bunch Squares look, which it will always be my favorite, I think. And we've had some fun things, some upside down people and counselors wearing other counselors' faces on shirts. Very memorable things. Now that we're kind of a little more hybrid, Brett has come together with a great setup that gives everybody a look at the various things going on at the podium, on the dais, at a distance, and then the presentations themselves. Really, I mean, this really is the major way we are able to reach the public, because then they can actually go back and watch the meetings, hear the comments for themselves. We don't have to interpret that for them. They can come to their own decisions on that. Next slide. So how do we connect? Well, first of all, I answer some major questions that honestly were the questions I had as a Provo citizen. So what's going on? Well, to let people know about that, we have our newsletter. We have almost 800 subscribers to the newsletter, but then we get at least that many more people clicking over to the newsletter from Facebook. We share it in all the neighborhood Facebook groups and some other city-oriented Facebook groups as well. So it's reaching quite a few people. We also are able to use social media for immediate needs. Most recently, helping get the word out about the incident at Provo High School last week. But then I also live tweet during these council meetings. So if anybody wants to follow along, they're seeing what's on the agenda and what the decisions are along the way. Twitter's also where the media tends to reach out to us. It's been very valuable that way. And then on Facebook, our engagement and reach has increased to 8 times what it was in 2014. We're just making really good use of it to get information out to people. YouTube, where we broadcast our videos, we have probably 100 to 300 live views each month. And when you think of pulling in that number of people in our chambers here, you know, that can be a little overwhelming. So there's at least those views. And then about 1,000 or 2,000 more people watch after the fact. Those on-demand views are very huge, not only for the general public, but also for city staff who take advantage of being able to recap any meeting. So on the question of why should I care, this one actually it drives me the most, because our agendas tend to be, well, sometimes they're very jargony and the public doesn't always know what exactly the issue is that the council is discussing. So about 4 years ago, I started our citizens agenda. The one for today's meetings is our 95th citizens agenda we've put out, and it helps people to get that information on what each agenda item is, a little bit of background, and you know where we're going with it. And then we get probably we have a lot of fluctuation. It depends on what's out there, what the hot issues are, but we have anywhere from 200 to 1,800 views of the citizens agenda on our blog, and I've been impressed with the people who've reached out to me, you know, really complimenting this effort from our office to be able to help people connect a little better. We also try to take the jargon out of it as much as possible. So, you know, it's easy to swim in an alphabet of abbreviations at times, and we want the public to understand exactly what we're talking about. Next, once we can get them to to care about an issue, then they ask, when's the best time to speak up? Well, we've made a lot more things available on Open City Hall for people to voice their opinion. Most rezone applications are now landing on there, which helps people if they're not able to attend a neighborhood meeting, or if they just get around to reading about it in the middle of the night. We have, over the 4 years that we've had Open City Hall, we've had over 16,000 unique visitors to the site. Over 3,000 different people have participated in various topics, and over 3,000 of them are subscribers, so we can let them know whenever there's a new topic on there. The council email address, and this is kind of a blessing and a curse probably. You'll thank me and hate me at the same time, but I realized how difficult it was when every 2 years there's a potential change in who's on the council. Well, now there's one council email address that goes out to all 7 of you, and it has really made it a lot easier for people to remember how they can reach out to you by email, and they don't have to research individual email addresses. And then the last question I generally try to address is now what? And I use all the tools above, letting people know, what's the next step in the process, and where they can be part of it, or even if it's done, what's our next step on our side. Next slide. So the neighborhood program, as I mentioned before, actually is a really great connection for us for communications. It amplifies our reach. We send information out pretty regularly to neighborhood chairs, and they kind of act as our ambassadors. They often are paying a little more attention to what's going on, and they can help further explain things and connect people to either the council or city staff, whatever is appropriate for an issue. And that's been very helpful. They also will send information out to whoever they have in their email list. And I work with the neighborhood chairs to get things out on the neighborhood Facebook groups. And that's paid off in big ways as we get information out there and they have those conversations in more of a neighborhood setting. Next. One of the things I've really enjoyed is improving public engagement by being able to collaborate with others. I came in with a pretty solid background in communications and social media, but government is a whole other monster in a way. Rules and guidelines can be very different, and people aren't always happy to hear from government. So I've been able to work with several different organizations, national ones like government, social media organization, and engaging local government leaders. And then ones here in the state of Utah, the Utah PIO Association, and this year I'm on the board for the Utah Association for Government Communications. And then probably the biggest boost has come in the last 2 years with the mayor organizing a city PIO team. And that's helped us be more aware of each other across the different departments. And we've become a lot more efficient at how we share information as a city. Next. So I focus on these goals. The biggest one, of course, is to inform people of what's going on. But then I want to take it a step further and educate people. It's really painful to hear from somebody that, after we've had 4 years of meetings on a topic that, someone hasn't heard anything about it and is really worked up. I always hope that people will get in on the process sooner. So we also regularly invite input, probably another blessing and curse from me to you. Sorry. We try really hard when people have an opinion. We do encourage them to please speak up, please share your thoughts. And honestly, the last one, making government accessible, 2 minutes of public comment really doesn't do a lot, but helping people to find other ways, whether it's emailing the council or getting involved on some committee, or finding any way to be more interactive with their local government. You know, that pays off in the end. And I know the Provology courses that the mayor's office has provided for several years now, that has actually generated neighborhood chairs, committee members for quite a few different boards and commissions. It's been an amazing thing when you can get people to understand and access their government a little bit more. And next, so moving forward, we want to continue with this transparency and accessibility. You see on here, there are some graphics that our graphic designer worked with me to put together so that we could give people a snapshot of what's on the agenda. The little icons tell them, is this just informational? Is this a voting item? You know, is this primarily for public comment? And then we have a meeting recap one that has really impressed people because they like just that snapshot of what passed and what didn't. And I'm able to do that very quickly, and they don't have to wade through anything else. With Open City Hall, as we continue to use that, it'll build upon itself. People will learn to rely on it more and more as we can add new topics to it. And I like it because people can really sit and study a particular issue. And then the remote public comment opportunities. I'm happy that we've continued to allow people to comment from home or wherever they happen to be, instead of needing to take the time to come down to City Hall and sit through the entire meeting in order to make their comment. This has actually increased, you know, the willingness of quite a few people to make comments, and that's been enjoyable, and it's something that I really hope we can continue to do moving into the future. And next, I mentioned Linktree. This is for making it easier to engage with council and staff. I've listed a lot of different things that we're doing, and it's nice that, oh wow, my text got all garbled in there, but it's, anyway, it's a Linktree link for Provo City Council. That's what it's supposed to be. And it has everything all in one place. So, Malia, if you can go to the next one, you might have to click it to start it. You'll see, whoops, maybe not. Unless it's on the, is it on the PDF? So while she's getting that, the nice thing with Linktree is it gives you one place to put links to all your social media, your website, your email signups, everything. And if the video plays, you should be seeing. It just doesn't like me today. It doesn't want to play. Okay. Well, I can send you a video later, but on each of these items, you'll be able to click and get to the different information. We can update it at any time. So, and I will send that out to you as well. We've added this to all our social media accounts in the About section, and that's really a great way to make sure people find us, you know, in the area they want to. As Wayne Parker has mentioned in the past, he says, you know, when we survey the public about how they want to be communicated with, where do they want us to reach them? They want us to reach them wherever they are, which is kind of everywhere. So this is our way of saying, okay, pick which one you want to connect with us on. And next slide, that you've seen a few times accidentally. So wanted to give some kudos out to Mr. Fillmore. So glad he didn't mute himself for City Hall Selfie Day. This is an annual thing, and I get pretty excited about it. Everyone in the office knows this is something I strive for. Mr. Fillmore provided a wonderful selfie in front of our city library, formerly the Brigham Young Academy, and we won an award for the most historic photo. So thank you, Mr. Fillmore. And many of you have contributed in the past to efforts like these, and I really appreciate that. I'm so excited that we're getting noticed in this way. And next, so our staff was able to help out several other agencies during the pandemic. I know our team worked so hard and put so many things together that we were able to share that across the country to some other government organizations, and then and we even had one of them come meet with us so that we could talk about some things that went wrong, unfortunately, in their world, and we were able to help them have some success after that. And then I've been able to speak at some different events, and an upcoming one this Thursday, I will be speaking at a national conference that unfortunately we were forced to go all digital, but it'll be exciting to continue to help others who are doing this kind of work. And the last slide. So those of you who stopped by my office have seen my new chosen job title. This is kind of what it feels like, chaos coordinator. But I've really enjoyed being able to help the public to learn and help you be aware of what issues are out there. This is a great time. I don't know where we are on the schedule overall. We're probably really close to needing to stop. But if you have ideas for how we want to move in any particular direction going forward, please let me know. The world of communications is always changing. So I guarantee no idea is a bad one at this point. Ms. Ellsworth?
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate you. It's obviously an honor for you to present as a model to these other cities. So way to go. And thank you for the endless work that you do to communicate with citizens. It is truly endless. My only aspiration, I think, for communications, and I don't know where this starts, but I'd love to see us get away from our Blogspot blog website and move towards a website that is integrated with the provo.org website. That's just more modern, easier to navigate, and integrated into provo.org.
And that is something we have requested. When you brought it up previously, I put in that request, and hopefully now that some other projects are winding down, they can help us figure out a way to do that a little more seamlessly. Mr. Fillmore? Oh, no.
I just want to say 3 cheers for you, Karen. You've done a remarkable job. I mean, in addition to being the most extroverted personality at City Hall, you are a perfect fit for this assignment, and you've done great things in this limited amount of time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm only fooling you into thinking I'm an extrovert. I do a good job of acting.
Well done.
Thank you.
Mr. Strachan?
Yeah, Council, Karen has been a treasurer in that role for a number of years now, at least 6 or so years, and she continues to amaze and teach us as she works our way through the communications end of things. If you need any help, any suggestions on how to even up your communications games, go sit down with her and spend an hour, and she'll teach you a lot of things. We're very grateful for what she brings to the table, and between her and Elizabeth and Brett Borgett over the last year and a half, as we've dealt with the COVID changes and things like that, Karen's been one of the leaders of those three in terms of making things possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate all you do. Ms. Ellsworth again?
Yeah, I just have one more comment. Thank you to our staff and to the broadcasting and technology staff and making these meetings available live and then in perpetuity on YouTube. I've looked for other cities' council meetings on YouTube and I don't find them, but I can find ours really easily. So thank you to everyone who makes that possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for that presentation and appreciate your efforts. Okay, our last item for this work meeting is a presentation from Provo City School District on facility and construction updates, specifically regarding the traffic challenges in the Timpview neighborhood. And we have Mr. Keith Rattel, the Provo School District Superintendent, and Mark Wheeler.
Fidel Montero.
Thank you for standing in to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Keith Rattel, and I wanted to express my appreciation for your willingness to listen to our request today. We are, to cut to the chase, we're requesting that the city council and the city approve a temporary parking restriction for Quail Valley Drive for the next 2.5 to 3 years, mainly because that is our main construction access into the construction site. There are big trucks going in and out of there, and we are very concerned about the potential for accidents and other challenges. This would only be between 7 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. I would be willing to pay for the cost of the signs. So really all we're looking for here is your approval. I guess I shouldn't minimize it and say all we're looking for, but it's something that will, I think, prove to be a very important safety measure for that area of the community. This is a 3-year project, and so the construction is underway now in terms of clearing the site and preparing the site. Actual building of the new wing has not begun as of yet. But if you look through the slides, and I think I'll turn the time over to Fidel. He can answer your questions and maybe talk you through a couple of views there. So whoever's ever running this, could you move to slide 2, please? There we go. So you can see in the front, the foreview there, that most of the area which was parking has been now cleared, and it's now being prepared to house a building on that north end. Fidel, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. You know, it's kind of fun to be in front of you. I see all of your names from your campaigning, and now I get to be here in, you know, in the flesh and blood and in Zoom, to those on Zoom. One of the biggest considerations in our request here is that as our students are utilizing Quail currently to park, many of them are ignoring any sort of, you know, proper crossing protocol. So they just sort of run across Quail. They're not paying a ton of attention to traffic. If you know that street, there's a sort of a bend that is in place about 100, 200 yards north of the seminary building. So it's a blind spot for cars that are coming down Quail. It's a very steep road. So even if you're not trying, just physics impacts the velocity of the cars. So I've seen kids sort of just cross without seeing cars coming, and our biggest priority is avoiding any sort of incident from happening there. I think that the neighbors that utilize Quail would also appreciate it in terms of getting garbage trucks and other types of services that you provide as a city to those streets. The traffic management has been it's been okay to this point. We've been trying to communicate with our neighbors extensively. I personally have gone door to door in the neighboring streets to sort of talk to our neighbors, to give them phone numbers of folks that they can contact at our school in case of somebody parks in front of their driveway or it's blocking mail access and so forth. We know it's busy currently, but I think this particular adjustment would help a lot with safety and with the increased traffic that will take place here in the next few months. What do you think? Any questions?
Questions from the council? Mr. Hanley?
Yeah, thank you both for being here. I'm curious to know, I mean, I know this has been just a total nightmare of trying to manage all of these cars and so on. I'm curious a little bit about, I mean, obviously whoever's parking there is going to go someplace else to park. And I'm sure I'm just curious what programs or incentives you've done to try to get fewer kids to drive and park during, and it's almost a massive lifestyle change that you really need, especially if it's through the fall of 2023, right? We've got to sort of figure out how to get more students using fewer cars. Anyway, I'm just curious what you're doing.
No, I appreciate the question. We've seen a huge increase in bike access, and last year we used one bike rack literally, and it was sparsely used. This year we've added, a superintendent purchased an additional 4 or 5 racks that are full every day. So I don't have an exact statistic for you on how many bikes have we've increased, but it's pretty significant just based on that anecdotal data. We're partnering with the LDS Church. They have a chapel that's right on 3460, Keith. And just west, we call it the Ripples Chapel for a lack of a better term. It's right south of the tennis courts, and the LDS Church was very generous in allowing us to arrange a partnership with them where we contract with them and we take care of the grounds. That there's a lot of potential for parking there. We're only seeing approximately 40 to 50 cars being utilized per class period. I believe there's 190 spots there, so we're going to create some more sort of incentives to get those students that are parking on Quail to move into that spot because it's underutilized. We are a bit concerned about what will happen with the bicycles, with the foot traffic that students are using right now when winter really hits and it gets darker. So that is a concern. But to this point, we've seen a huge increase in bicycles, kids walking to school, and then folks dropping off their children.
We've also encouraged increased ridership on our buses from all over the city.
Yeah. Okay. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Hadley? Okay.
Other questions, Mr. Harding?
A couple questions, but we're really one main point. But I guess my main concern is if we prohibit parking along those streets, will the people that are parking there just move into the cul-de-sacs, just move into the next streets and still need to dart across that?
That's a good point and a good question. And right now let me see, there are 3 cul-de-sacs. 1, 2, 3, and they're already being utilized quite heavily. So again, we're trying to get our students to move out of those cul-de-sacs. I don't think you can, you certainly couldn't put a no parking sign in those areas because of the neighbors that are using them. But so we're trying, I'm guessing that kids would still want to go there. So we're going to try to work with those students that are still parking there and getting them to move. Even if we have to stand out there for a week or so, steering the traffic to the church and to other areas. I think that'll be sort of our strategy. We've hired some additional staff that's helping us manage parking. So we send them around in golf carts, and if we see kids that are not parking like they're supposed to, we have them write notes to the kids reminding them, that sort of stuff, right? So they're sort of working as parking enforcement, right? Because it helps.
You mentioned that thank you for that. I'm grateful that you're taking this so seriously. You talked about having knocked on doors and a big outreach to the neighbors. Are they aware of this request? Are they aware that we're?
So we haven't spoken with our neighbors in the cul-de-sac areas about their requests. I don't know if Mark has, Keith. We can certainly do that. We can certainly go and knock on their doors and say, hey, folks, I think they would probably appreciate it. But we haven't spoken with them directly. Okay. We spoke with them at the beginning of the year when we anticipated the increase in traffic. Okay. But we can certainly go out and knock on their door, especially those cul-de-sacs.
Okay. I was just curious. I appreciate the answer. My main point, and administration can correct me if I'm wrong on here, but this seems to be squarely in kind of the role of the administration. And I feel like this is something that our streets departments and traffic engineers, have full kind of control over or full say on. And so, I'm grateful for the presentation and to know what's going on. But I think not only are they set up to take care of it without necessarily coming to the council, but also may have some are experts in this area and may have some additional ideas on how to exactly tailor it. I like the idea of the hours and whatnot, but they may even have some better ideas as well. But it sounds like it's something that we're set up to help out with already.
We met with a group of your traffic engineers, and they were super helpful. We were considering some other parking alternatives, and they sort of walked us through the pros and cons of doing of implementing some of those strategies. When we raised the Quail Drive option, they were sort of the ones that recommended perhaps bringing it to the council and letting you be aware of that request before they sort of proceeded with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yeah, my question is purely logistical. I wonder if there's any advantage in having the restriction from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Instead of having this, and I understand it's probably correlated with the end of the high school day, but it seems like it might be just more straightforward and easy to enforce if it's a 12-hour block. Is that something that's been considered?
Yeah.
Well, it may seem a little counterintuitive, but we're trying to be thoughtful of the residents there who may park on the street from time to time as well. And the more we restrict it, of course, that's going to impact their lives in a negative way. And we're not trying to be bad neighbors in that way. So that's why we were thinking 4:30 would do the job.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes, I want to thank these gentlemen for taking the initiative on this significant safety issue. My primary concern, Keith, I think, is the cul-de-sacs, the neighbors there. The inconvenience to them because students will inevitably be led to park there, so that will require some patrolling. Wonder if there's a possibility of doing some signage that says no student parking. We certainly want the neighbors to feel free to park there and not be competing with the students for that space. And also just curious about the hours. What about game nights, football games, basketball games? What's your consideration there, both for Quail Valley and the cul-de-sacs?
If we look at previous years, they're always full. They're always jam-packed full of parking. Fidel, you would have a better idea as to whether there have been many complaints yet from the cul-de-sacs this year.
Mr. Fillmore, well, it depends if we're having a winning season or a losing season. If we're losing, we get a lot of complaints on parking, but if we're winning, people welcome us. Actually, with parking events, what we're doing, we're communicating to all of our constituents and our visiting schools to utilize the south. We have some south parking of the tennis courts. We're utilizing Edgemont, which has about 120 slots, Keith, for parking. And then we're using another 110 slots in the front of the school that's used for staff during the day for event parking as well. So all in all, we have around close to 300 slots for event parking. And up until now, we've hosted volleyball games, we've hosted some underclassmen football games, and they've managed okay. We have our first home game, our first home football game this weekend, and that'll be telling in terms of where people park. But we're really moving. We're asking people to go to Edgemont, south parking lot, in that front parking lot area.
Right. This Friday will be a good test. I particularly appreciate your willingness to knock on the doors for those neighbors in the cul-de-sacs. I think you might get some valuable input from them.
Yeah.
Other questions? This is logistically just wanting to create a safety and right away for the work trucks, the large trucks that come through. So whether or not we're going to move traffic somewhere else, I think is kind of a moot point. They need right away access so that we can get trucks safely to where they need to go.
So the one point that we didn't make is that over the next, probably starting in about 3 weeks, we're going to triple or quadruple the number of construction workers that are at the site. Currently, we have around, I believe, 15 construction workers, that's going to jump up to somewhere in the 60, 70 range, Keith, I believe. 50, and all of those folks will be parking in that area as well, coming in and out during the day. So that's going to increase traffic as well.
And so capacity at the LDS church building could be 3 times what
Yep,
it is right
that's right.
now. It's going unused. I'm just eyeballing this. I only see 20 to 25 spots for students along this particular track.
There's not
Am
a
I way
ton.
under that? I mean,
There's not a ton.
and my thought process is if the same folks who are trying to find parking there are probably already looking at the cul-de-sacs, they're probably already trying to park in the cul-de-sacs. I just don't see us pushing a lot of additional folks into the cul-de-sacs. They're probably already looking there for parking as we speak.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Other questions, Mr. Fillmore?
No, thank you.
Other questions from anybody on the council? Would the administration like to speak to kind of next steps? I'm kind of with Mr. Harding in that, that this is probably an engineering department call.
Yep, we can get on that. I think the conversations have been continuing. Our team's certainly aware. We have written quite a few parking citations already from people parking across driveways or on the corner of a cul-de-sac and Quail. And so there's, we're aware of the circumstances. We'll be happy to pick it up and take it from here.
Well, is there anybody on the council that's not supportive of the administration moving forward or anything that we need to do to support them? And I think you've got our support to, especially if it's about right away for what needs to happen there. So thank you for coming.
We'll be in touch shortly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, appreciate your time. Thank you. All right, unless there is anything else on that particular item, I think we've completed the items scheduled for today and 10 minutes early. So is Chair Sewell here? Do we need to invite him to present something else for 10 minutes or can we wrap up? Did he get off the call?
I'm not aware if he's on there or not, but there is nothing else on the agenda today.
So we haven't had a call for a closed meeting. So if there's no objection, we will now adjourn by unanimous consent.